Hello again, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to yet another quarantined edition of the Jim Cornette Experience. By now, you people are ready to be put in a rubber room at the Puzzle Factory, to be wearing a long-sleeved overcoat at Happy Acres. You're going crazy. You need some entertainment. Well, you've come to the wrong place. We're just going to talk to you a bunch today. Ladies and gentlemen, today I will admit defeat for the very first time. Also, we're going to find out more about Vince McMahon's $20 million man. We're going to talk memories of the first time I met Dusty. And we're going to watch more empty arena matches and then try to erase the memories from our psyches afterwards. Joining me in this, for old time's sake, he's Hawaiian Brian, the podcasting lion, the king of the Arcadian Vanguard Podcast Network, Mr. Co-host to you, the former proprietor of the French Toast Chateau until the food industry went to shit. And now, he doesn't have to go to Honolulu and buy a surfboard to hang 10. He can just stand here and smile. The great Brian Last, everybody.
Aloha, Jim. And thank you, Buddy Landell, for that great line right there.
Oh, Budrow. No show Budrow. We're here.
Did anyone ever call him that to his face? Everyone always.
Yes, he called himself that at one point later in life. No, I mean, you know, he had a good humor about it, but anyway, we're here again, all locked up. Most of us are locked up in our quarantines. They're trying to start opening some places. Apparently, the governor of Georgia is a nitwit. You can social distance while getting a tattoo and a haircut and a massage. And I've been to a few massage parlors in Georgia, and I don't know how in the world you can social distance in an environment like that. But most of us, the smart ones, the ones who listen to this program and actually get it, are still ensconced away, as far away from people as possible, so we don't catch the creeping crud. You know, they did a disservice also when they first started calling it the flu. I'm going to start here and then I'll go into something else and I'll come back to sickness. But this ain't the fucking flu. This is the goddamn magic bullet of mystery viruses. One person can be perfectly fine while having it, and another person's dead in a fucking week. First it was high-risk groups, and now people outside the high-risk groups are dying. It's transmissible across. I saw a fucking a computer simulation, and it looked too much like these movies I've seen where it spreads out all across the fucking country. Where one cough can spread this shit across 2 supermarket aisles. It's goddamn. It's a invisible magic fucking super virus that can attach itself to anything. They were calling it the flu for a while. I believe that's where we went sideways. What the fuck? I don't now. If I see somebody now without a mask and gloves on, I'm looking sideways at them. Especially old people who should know better. I can understand the goofy young people that want to just fucking motor mouth around with no mask on and their fucking lips flapping fucking deadly germs all over the goddamn community. But old people are just willy-nilly touching the keypads and just pawing all over everything in these stores and places of business. I'll limit that to the post office because that's the only place I've been. But I've been told that they're doing it in other places and just spreading fucking, probably picking their nose or whatever and shoving the virus up into their brain. They'll get brain virus from picking their noses because they weren't wearing gloves. And everybody knows it's no fun to pick your nose while you're wearing gloves. I tried it one time when I was a kid and it deviated my septum. But anyway, I'm just verklempt at some of these people. But also, I said I'm going to do this at the top of the program. I'm going to admit defeat. And for the last few shows, I've been begging people, the last few podcasts, please do not order from my unnamed website. Please do, because of the unprecedented demand, people being starved for entertainment. And me having such great deals, I was 2 weeks behind at last we spoke on some packages. Well, it's worse now. And don't worry, everybody's going to get all their stuff. I'll preface with that. But the capabilities of JimCornette.com have been overwhelmed. The quarantined people needing their entertainment because of this pandemic, the spike in orders has exceeded the infrastructure, ladies and gentlemen. And we have exceeded the infrastructure with the spike in orders. So I've come up with a completely brand new concept. I'm going to flatten the curve. Ladies and gentlemen. We are going to shut down the Cornette's Collectibles economy.
Wow.
In all seriousness, I'm going to have a bunch of people mad at me because I cannot dig my way out of this. I appreciate the tremendous support and the wonderful business that we've done over the last, it's been almost 4 weeks now. But at this point, I cannot. And now the rib is, I just went to ship 150 packages yesterday. Bree's still on vacation. And now they've got 4 windows at the post office, but they have to be a window apart. So only 2 people can work the window at a time because they have to leave an empty window in between them to be 6 feet apart. So if I've got my dedicated clerk for an hour, then one person has to deal with the rest of the business that comes in. And with Bree on vacation, then my best backup has to break and do passports. It's a nightmare scenario. It's a worst case scenario of a pandemic of shipping magnitude. So anyway, here's what we're going to do. I didn't want to just do this with no notice and make people think that I'd fucking absconded to Bermuda with everybody's money. So from May the 1st through the 14th, we're not taking the whole website down, JimCornette.com. We are just disabling, we hope. We're still in contact and negotiations with the guy that built this wingding. We're taking the store down so that you cannot place new orders for 2 weeks from May the 1st through May the 14th, which will give me time to fill all the backlogged orders, do an inventory that actually makes sense because they've been selling faster than I can count them, everything. I'll restock everything that I'm able to restock. The Wrestling Gold reduced price set is already gone. That's down. I may have 14 odd ones when we count all this whole thing up, but it's down. The action figures are down. They're going to be gone for the rest of the year. If we don't get the variant in, everything's gone for the rest of the year. So I've taken everything down. I believe that for the next 6 days, we might run out of. And I wanted to give everybody their chance because now, since you defied me, Cult of Cornette listeners, you defied my words and kept sending me money when I was obviously drowning in a sea of merchandise. Now here's your chance. Knock yourself out for the next 6 days. This is the 24th, right, of April. For the next 6 days, whatever you want, get your order in now, and we're closing down for 2 weeks. And not only are we going to fill the backlog from this end, but also it's going to take that long under the new post office restrictions with me going every day to ship this shit out and not create such a public nuisance that I'm reported on the TV news. So anyway, that is the current plan. We're going to flatten the curve, Brian. We exceeded not the number of beds, or the number of ventilators, but the number of hours in a day that Jim Cornette can personally do this shit. Because I feel like I failed the stress test on Bar Rescue, and John Taffer should come in and scream at me. But I have no choice here. I can't hire help. I'll find somebody, even if unemployed people are unemployed now, I'm going to find somebody that I can tolerate in my home for hours at a time to come to my house at all hours of the day or night to help me personally sign everything. What am I going to hire him to forge my signature? You know, me and Stacy here at the house, me sitting in a nightgown and my hair in curlers and her not having shaved for a week or something like that. And so then if I rent a storefront, I'm not going to do retail sales, but I would have some place to store it and somebody to work on it, but I still have to sign everything personally. And that sort of it removes the idea of working from home in my semi-retirement here. I didn't want to raise the prices because that'll run some people off, but we've talked about this before. I hit the fucking people $50 autographed 8x10s. Wrestling legends or movie stars, TV stars, whatever the fuck. $50 for a fucking 8x10. I come from the days when you bought the 8x10 off the table for $1, and if you asked the babyface, he'd sign it for you for nothing. Or elsewise he'd get yelled at by the booker for not being a babyface. I can't do that to people. I give them quality merchandise at affordable prices, and I get good deals on stuff and pass that savings on to the consumer. It's the American philosophy and way of life here. You get more stuff, and I get more money. But anyway, so for quality control purposes, we are pausing to catch up, and then we will reopen for business on May 14 when we believe the curve has flattened. It was the only way out, Brian.
It's about time. I don't know how you haven't done this already. People hear you on the show and they think you're exaggerating or playing it up for giggles,
comedic purposes.
They don't realize, because they don't talk to you on the phone, that this struggle is real. It's become overwhelming, and I've been telling you off air for a while that maybe you need to take a break for.
Well, I'm interacting with the cult members on a personal basis. It's it's our social intercourse that we have, and I take pride in that. But I need to catch up, and I'm too popular. I'm too popular. But I hope that there are no protests as I'm doing the shutdown to flatten the curve. But anyway, at the start of the program, we've got two different individuals passed away that had a lot to do with professional wrestling in their own specific ways. And I get one of them was more of a shock than the other because he was not that old, but Scott Bowden and Joe Pedicino both passed away. Joe, I think, was 70. He'd had a stroke last year and was in bad shape after that. But Scott has been active until just recently on Twitter and doing his podcast. You've been doing some shows with him, or had been in the recent past. And he was a big Memphis wrestling fan and a big Memphis wrestling supporter.
Yeah, very passionate about Memphis wrestling. The reason I started Kentucky Fried Wrestling with Scott was because I was such a fan of his articles. I think he may be the most talented writer for wrestling that I ever read, because he was able to get the excitement and the energy of Memphis wrestling into his articles. And they were packed with history. They were packed with humor. They were just tremendously done. I always wanted him to write a book about Memphis wrestling, because I thought it would have been fantastic. And, that passion started at a young age. He was a fan. He was attending shows, famously the show with Mil Mascaras on it in 1979. And then he became a manager. And I think one of the sad things about his career on camera is that it was during a down period for Memphis wrestling, really the last period, because he was great. He was really, really good. I say that he's underrated because I don't think a lot of people either saw or paid attention to that era. But you go back on YouTube and you watch those clips, he's phenomenal. He's kind of like a mix between you and Jimmy Hart. Jimmy Hart in Memphis, not Jimmy Hart in the WWF.
Well, yeah. But that's because he was a fan and he knew what it was supposed to look like, which is the same thing that helped me. I'd seen Jimmy Hart, but I'd also seen Bobby Heenan. And Jimmy Hart had seen all the Tennessee managers beforehand, and Scott had seen, me for a little while, but Jimmy Hart for all of his glory period in Memphis, but just also he was a wrestling fan. He not only knew what it was supposed to look like and sound like, but he kind of knew what to say in some instances. He made Dave Brown flip his fucking wig a couple of different times on live Memphis TV.
That's right.
One time he called Randy Hales a retard, and I thought Dave shit his pants. I saw the tape. I wasn't there.
And apparently he did, by the way, after that segment backstage at WMC, apparently he walked up to Bowden and he said, what the fuck are you doing?
Yeah. And the reason why we're laughing so hard is because that may have been the first time, and Dave probably would have been almost 60 at that point. That may have been the first time that Dave Brown ever said the word fuck. I don't know that I've ever heard him say it yet to this day. But that's the thing with Scott. He was a fan, and he had known Brian and Kevin Lawler, when he was a kid growing up. And it just, when you were in Memphis wrestling was so mainstream through the 70s and 80s that not only was everybody watching the show and everybody was kind of a fan. When I say everybody, I'm talking about legitimately 60% of the fucking city had working knowledge or was an outright fan of what was going on in Memphis wrestling in those days. And, he grew up watching some of the best and he really loved it. And you're right. He was a tremendous writer also, and did those great columns on his website. And I think that to this day is why I say that Jerry Jarrett could not break his heart and tell him that was not Mil Mascaras. And he made up that Who Shot John story about, how he got Mascaras to do that stretcher job, just to not admit that it was either fucking Pepe Lopez or maybe the Mexican Angel in from Nick's territory in Nashville. But I saw Scott. Actually, I never met him back in those days because I wasn't in Memphis, and he was in and out from, 91 through 96. But I don't think he was there when I made, because he had got out of school and he worked there and then he moved away, but he came back for a while, blah, blah, blah. I don't think he was there the few times that I was doing shots there at that time. But at any rate, but we contacted on email here a few years back, and I didn't know his first name was really Travis. So somebody had said, yeah, Travis Bowden told me that he knew you and to get a hold of you and blah, blah, blah. I said, I don't know who this fucking guy is, because I knew him as Scott. And then I got the email from Scott like, no, it's me. And I'd seen him down at the Memphis Hall of Fame ceremony that Randy Hales had done at Lawler's place on Beale Street. What was it, 2 or 3 years ago now? But anyway, he was like, 48? So
48.
It would have done a lot more great stuff with Memphis wrestling, and I hate to see that, but also, did you ever know Joe Pedicino?
Sadly, no. And, that's one of the guests I always wanted for 605. And I debated getting in touch several times, or getting in touch with Bonnie Blackstone several times. Unfortunately, when I was finally ready to do something, I had heard a whisper that he had had his stroke, and it turned out that was true. But I wish I had a chance to talk with Joe. A fascinating guy, an interesting guy who had been involved in various aspects of the business and then kind of just left the business.
Well, yeah. Well, I think he, after the last stuff, I think he finally had enough, because he had so much energy and passion for everything, and he knew he was going to do something, and he ended up meeting a number of, goofballs, as you do when you try to do something in the wrestling business. But I actually started watching Joe before I met him, because he had the Saturday Night Superstars of Wrestling block on. The first station was WATL, right? Channel 36. On Saturday nights, from 8 o'clock until 2 a.m, he would show all the syndicated wrestling shows, Memphis, Mid-South, World Class, UWF, Power Pro. I think they had both of them on at one period of time when they split into both shows. But WWF Superstars, he had everything besides TBS wrestling in pretty much in the country in that 6-hour block weekly. And he would do the wraparounds. And that's how he met Bonnie. His wife she won the contest to be his co-host. Wouldn't you know who won the pony? But they weren't actually together then. They were later. And they were married together for what was that been 30 fucking 5 years. That's pretty good. Anyway, what I would do is in the summer of 85, when we first moved from Dallas to Atlanta, when Crockett was running the split offices, Atlanta and Charlotte, they put us in Atlanta supposedly to keep us away from the Rock and Roll Express, who were based out of Charlotte for 6 months. It turned into 3 months. But for 3 months, we were in Georgia, mostly doing the Georgetown short trip territory on most Saturday nights. I was back from Columbus or wherever the fuck it may have been by, 11:30, 12 o'clock. And I would have rolled tape on everything. So I'd sit there, I'd have time to get the Dominoes and a giant soft drink, and I would sit there all night and watch the Superstars of Wrestling show. So I knew what was going on everywhere. And of course, as soon as we moved to Charlotte and started traveling like that, that went out the window. I still get the tapes, but I'd fast forward a lot. But anyway, Joe started helping out the local promotions. He had helped out Sammy Kent with North Georgia Wrestling. And I think, when Blackwell was running, what was the name of his company?
Ooh, I forget the name.
Yeah.
You forgot Deep something. South. I'm getting it confused with Deep South, but that was Jody Hamilton.
But anyway, nevertheless, he started helping some of the local promotions, but he was more in television because he'd been in radio and television sales and that business primarily, and was just a big wrestling fan. And he actually got that Pro Wrestling This Week magazine style show with him and Gordon Soley syndicated. It was in a ton of markets there at the time, the mid to the later 80s. And anyway, he'd had a lot more television success, but he was never promoted himself. But he promoted himself plenty on his TV, but he never himself was a wrestling promoter. And then I met him when he came to WCW because Herd wanted people with TV backgrounds. Joe fit that, and broadcasting backgrounds. And Joe fit that, but he also he was a big wrestling fan. I think probably Herd thought that his level was on the, or his knowledge was on the level of Eddie Graham. I don't think, Joe would say that to me. He may have told Herd that. But he was looking at guys, Herd was like Steve Beverly and Joe Pedicino, to know wrestling and be TV guys. And this is not knocking Joe, because he knew a lot more wrestling than most TV people and a lot more TV than most wrestling people. But the office was starting to listen to people who had television backgrounds and a lot of knowledge of wrestling and looking at the business as they looked at it instead of looking at the business as people who were actually in the wrestling business looked at it. And that's where the disconnect came and shit started going south. In a lot of cases. But anyway, they brought Joe in to do the fan segment as the fans man, Joe Pedicino Knows, which we all started calling Joe Pedicino's Nose, which I don't know if I started that, but I certainly helped it along its way. But Joe was fun to work with. And after that little run, then I can't remember what happened with him in Atlanta, but I know what happened with me in Atlanta, but he's the one that called me when I left WCW and said, hey, you want to do color commentary with me on the LPWA, the Ladies Professional Wrestling Association. And they were doing the TV tapings, and it wasn't like Glow. They were having matches, and without too much preposterousness. But the way the deal got funded was that Tor Berg, who was a promoter out of Minneapolis, and knew Wally Carbo was like the commissioner at one time, and they were bringing Wally Carbo to the taping, so I could sit and talk to him about Vern Gagne stories and fucking shit like that. And Ray Stevens, they brought as an agent a couple times. That's when I got to drive Ray Stevens back from Atlanta to Charlotte when our flight got diverted, and had him in the car for 4 hours by myself. But a lot of the AWA talent or mainstays were being brought in through that connection. But the whole thing got set up because Magnificent Mimi had a rich boyfriend in Las Vegas that was financing the whole thing. And as long as she was fucking around with him, he was giving Tor Berg the money to run the Ladies Professional Wrestling Association so she could be the top star. But then somehow she got heat with him, and then that's when the guy cut the money off, and right in the middle of a big fucking run. Anyway, so Joe asked me to come out and do color, and it was great. They brought me out once a month. And, Bonnie did Bonnie Blackstone did the backstage interviews, and me and Joe did the announcing. And the girl, Leilani Kai and Judy Martin were there. Some of the old time girls, Moolah's girls that I knew, and then others, the new generation, but like Bambi and Peggy Lee, and Chris Love Burt Prentice was there as the manager, the Queen, Christopher Love. So that we did that for about a year until Mimi fell out with the backer. But Joe would take me to the me and my wife at the time actually would take us to the steakhouse in whatever hotel we were staying in. There was a few different ones, but there'd always be a steakhouse, and he would sit down to order, and he would say to the waitress, "Can you look around and get me the largest and rarest piece of prime rib that you have back there available?" Every single largest and rarest. And then it's a funny fucking story. I'm not making fun of Joe, but he got when he still was doing the local TV show in Atlanta, he got a deal with this weight loss program. Because Joe had to be north of 400 in those days. And the round mound of sound is what we nicknamed him at WCW. But he got a sponsorship where every week he's supposed to give updates he's on this weight loss program. I can't remember what it was, or whether it was a gym or a diet plan or whatever it was, but this program. And he'd give these updates and he'd show how much weight he lost and blah, blah, blah. As it got several weeks down the road, he hadn't lost any weight. And I think there was actually an issue with that where he might have had to give some money back because he never really did. I think it just kind of discontinued itself on the air and they carried it out, in private after that. But it's sort of like Vader going to the Duke University weight loss clinic and gaining weight. But anyway, I was sad to hear about that because I hadn't seen or heard from Joe or heard of Joe. He did leave wrestling for the most part. And I think he did do one Fan Fest appearance in Atlanta when Greg Price was doing the Fan Fest and switched it from Charlotte to Atlanta. And that's the year that Sinclair had just bought Ring of Honor and I couldn't go anyway. So I never saw him. So I haven't seen him probably in over 20 years.
Did you see him after Global? After the one taping you and Stan went to?
Well, no, we went to a couple. I think but here's another thing. So I mentioned he had never been a promoter. So I left WCW and he called me to do the LPWA. And then in the latter stages of that, he said, "I'm going to be starting a promotion." I said, "What?" "The Global Wrestling Federation." I said, "Explain how." "Well, and we're going to, I can't remember all the things that he said at first, but it basically, as it came out, he was going to have national TV. He was probably going to, I don't remember whether Dallas was his original location he was going to shoot or not. But I think ESPN was mentioned. But the story was that he had found a Nigerian businessman named, I'm going to butcher this, but something to the effect of Olu Oliani, who was going to finance him to the tune of $30 million to start a wrestling promotion. And at one time he had taken, and he sent me the letter of credit from a bank, and I still have it somewhere here. If that old fax paper, the print hadn't just completely disappeared, he faxed me a letter of credit from a bank to Olu Oliani for up to $30 million line of credit. And I'd never seen a line of credit letter from a bank for $30 million before at that time, but it sure looked halfway good enough to me, right? But this can't be right, but boy, somebody's going to a lot of trouble here, right? And he was banking on it. He was planning the biggest thing you've ever heard of. And then he was going to buy the USWA, the Memphis territory, from Jerry Jarrett, because I guess it was probably in 91. I came home to Louisville. It may be early 92. I can't remember whether I was home because of the holidays and did it or whether they specifically asked me to come. But they had a big TV taping in the Louisville Gardens because Jarrett at the time still had a relationship with ESPN, right?
Yeah, he was on ESPN.
Okay, so they were doing an ESPN TV taping in the Louisville Gardens, and I did color and appeared on it at some respects throughout the night, and they also introduced Joe. Joe was there backstage. They talked about Joe Pedicino being either the future owner of the USWA or starting the Global Wrestling Federation or whatever. It went that far. Also in the back of the Louisville Gardens that night was the aforementioned Olu Oleani. And when I saw him, I said, oh, you got to be kidding me. He looked like a Nigerian Louis Armstrong. He had these giant cheeks, this fat face, and these giant cheeks. And he was walking around in what you would expect a Nigerian businessman to dress like in casual dress, this print shirt and something that looked like it was an expensive pair of slacks and these shiny shoes. And he had met a girl wrestler at the time that either was in Memphis or he brought her. I think she was working there just whatever the fuck briefly. It wasn't Miss Texas. Her name was Sweet Georgia Brown. And she was this young black girl that is, because some people I think have said, oh, wasn't that Miss Texas? She may have used that name, but this was just some independent girl. And he was just showing a lot of attention to this young lady. And obviously, you know, Joe was probably going to sign her up to be a big star in his wrestling promotion. And I'm like, I just can't believe this is happening. But there's Jerry Jarrett talking to Joe seriously about purchasing the Memphis territory. And then they get on television and they do tapings from the Sportatorium. And they booked me and Stan Lane to come down. And
the Global Dome, not the Sportatorium.
Well, the Global Dome, as they renamed it. But I didn't see the Nigerian businessman there when we got there. And anyway, a lot of stars were there. A lot of names were there. But it was the same old ring in the Sportatorium because Joe said, well, it's bolted down to the ground. There's a door underneath the ring. It goes somewhere. We're not sure. I'm like, fucking hell. But we worked at one taping, but I could sense also something was wrong when he was paying us good money each and bought us each a plane ticket from Charlotte to Dallas and back. But I asked about a hotel. I said, can we stay at the La Quinta at the airport? Oh, we've got we're putting all the talent at a hotel in between the airport and the building. Okay, we got to this fucking hotel. And first they had me and Stan down to room with each other, which that didn't work for either one of us because of our differing lifestyles. So we now individual rooms, and then we opened these rooms. There was 2 lights in my room with a combined wattage of 40 in both these fucking light fixtures. In this goddamn, it was like an old motor court that the rest of New Dallas had been built up around, and it was spooky laid out, and all the doors went straight out into the parking lot. It was fucking dark as a goddamn tomb. Smelled a little off kilter. I said, nah, we'll see you later. So we went back to La Quinta and checked in and went down to the Sportatorium and presented the bill to Joe. It was like they were getting those rooms for like $29 a piece in Dallas near the airport. Even in those days, that was pretty good. So I smelled something was wrong there. And then shortly afterwards, it went from Olu Oleani. The Nigerian businessman didn't have $30 million, but Max Andrews was the backer, the syndicator in Dallas was the backer behind the thing at that point. Is that correct?
I think so.
I believe that's the way it happened. But anyway, they did some good shows. Joe I don't know about the handsome stranger thing for Bagwell. Joe was really, he was happy as a clam about that one. I never got that one. But they did good shows for a while. They used some good talent. They gave some people some breaks. And he legitimately believed he wasn't in on a scam. He legitimately believed, even if, as Joe Koff would say, he might have been smoking a little of the hopium, that he was going to be able to do those things and was going to be able to get that money. And the guy stuck him and he'd kind of stuck his neck out. So I think he took Andrews on and they went as long as they could with it. But anyway, and he came to one of the early Smoky Mountain tapings. Joe and Bonnie both came up to Spartanburg because it wasn't that far from Atlanta. And I remember him visiting there. But, after all of that, he's been in sales and owned, I think, some radio stations, have been in radio advertising sales and stuff like that, and just really stayed away from wrestling. And, at that point, I don't blame him because he's so successful in other things and he's got these fucking people giving him bullshit in the wrestling business. Why would you, really want to continue to be involved? I've asked myself that question many times. But he was fun. He was fun. I wish you'd have got a chance to meet him. I guess, what was it? Like I said, last year he had a stroke, and they put a video out. You know, he was having to relearn how to speak, and they was having a lot of trouble getting around, and so I guess over the last year and being 70, that obviously probably didn't get a lot easier. So anyway, to Bonnie, if she's listening, and I can't imagine why she would, but I love her. We send you our sympathy, and to all of his family and the fans that remember the old Saturday Night Superstars of Wrestling block. That was cool. You would have loved that. How old were you in 1985?
I was 5.
You would have loved that. Pull right up there in your little fucking zoom little tricycle. You ride around the house, and in 6 hours you'd have had to get up and go potty a couple times.
You know, between that and Pro Wrestling This Week, and I guess you could even say the early days of the GWF, he did so many things that hardcore wrestling fans appreciate.
Yeah, well, and as a matter of now, if there was because he was having to syndicate television at a time when every major company was trying to syndicate their wrestling show, but he did it. And he was trying to promote at a time when there was the end of the territories. I did the same thing, only he wanted it to go national, but he did it for a while. If it was today and he had the internet and digital capability, and everybody's their own television station, he'd be Tony Khan. He'd be the darling of every hardcore fan, because he would be doing all kinds of shit they would just love, and not in a bad way. I don't think Joe Pedicino would have booked the Invisible Man. He liked the wrestling business too much. So, you know, if he had the advantages that they have today of broadcasting and being able to show your shit all over the world and different revenue streams, you know, he was stuck like with the rest of us. We had to make money off tickets and TV advertising. But anyway, there's a couple of shocking instances this past week, Scott and Joe. And, you know, I'm looking at the news, and it's horrible. Also, I don't know the circumstances behind Joe, but I'm wondering, being in hospitals and rest homes, a lot of people now can't be, I'll just blurt this out, you can't be with your family member when they're dying now in hospitals or in rest homes or whatever, because of the infection, and some of them are closed down, and, you know, blah, blah, blah. It's on the news now. People are having to FaceTime with their senior citizen family members or whatever when they're in the old folks home about to pass away. That's bullshit. That's ridiculous. And anyway, to try to put a positive spin on this, our friends and the folks at BetterHelp is now something that we've been getting feedback, is something that more people have been checking out, because you don't have to do it in person. And people don't want to go to therapists. Sometimes they don't want to go whether there's a pandemic or not, just because they know the people, or it's a small town, or they don't have access. We've talked about that before, but now with people closed up and they can't be around their family, or if there's a member of their family in trouble, they can't all gather together and talk about it. And some people don't have anybody to talk to. So this can be done online, securely, by phone, by video chat or conference, as they call it. And it's offline, or it's more affordable than the offline counseling that they talk about. But at the same time, you can access it from almost anywhere. So you've had some testimonials, Brian. I've had some. But especially these days when it's harder to get to talk to people, at least in person, or if you don't have anybody to talk to on the phone, BetterHelp can help you.
Yeah, I think that's one of the big points right there. If you're someone who feels like you need someone to talk to right now, just because whatever it is that's happening in the world is just overwhelming you and you're all alone, BetterHelp is a great option for you.
And if you go to BetterHelp, and that's HELP, betterhelp.com/JCE, you can get 10% off your first month of services and join the over 800,000 people taking charge of their mental health with the help of an experienced professional. I've said many times I need experienced professional help.
We've all said that about
I've
you.
never what did you just say? What did you rewind it? Wait a minute. Who's we all? Who's been conspiring behind my back?
I thought I was on mute. I'm so sorry.
Yeah. Blurting out your true feelings. Here's something we could all be thankful for. Did you hear the big news? Ron Gronkowski is back in the National Football League.
Does that mean he vacates his 24/7 championship?
They actually tweeted out some shit and somebody retweeted it. Well, just remember that Ron Gronkowski is still in possession of the 24/7 title and it could be taken away from him anywhere. I dare them, if they do ever play NFL games again in stadiums with people, if that does happen, when it happens, I double dog dare them to try to get the NFL to go along with one of their fucking supposed star players. And by the way, if this idiot is a current star in the NFL, maybe chances are that the same things happen to the NFL talent pool that's happened to the quality of the wrestling talent pool over the last 20 years. But anyway, if this guy does a job on the fucking sidelines, the 50-yard line at halftime of a fucking game, I will get hot. I'll cut a bitch. I will fucking throw some shit if the NFL starts doing this fucking hokey ass bullshit. But hopefully this means that he will not darken the doorstep of quality wrestling fans again, and instead will dance and shuffle and Iggy his way, whatever that fucking awkward dance step was, that epileptic seizure that he used to have. It looked like he stuck his finger in a light socket and his dick in a fucking meat grinder, and he'd go to the ring like that. If he'll do that on the goddamn football field instead of wrestling, then it'll be much better. And does this mean we don't have to see Mojo Rising or whatever his name was again?
Mojo Rawley, and unfortunately, I don't think he's been taken to the NFL, so we may be stuck with him.
Can they not? I just opened a cold Sprite Zero.
This is
by the
making
way.
you drink.
It's making me. I'm drinking early today. Just the thought of these fucking cretins. Is there any way that they can take Mojo to be the water boy? If Adam Sandler can do it, Mojo Nixon can do it.
I think Mojo would actually be very effective on the sidelines, just doing his little dance and yelling at people, whatever it is that he does, whatever keeps him out of the ring. Let's embrace that.
Fucking hell. Who's he going to play for? He came from the Northeast, from up in New England.
The Patriots.
Ron Gronkowski, right? The New England Patriots, but now he's gone down south to Florida.
Tampa Bay.
So now he can be the one they're talking about when they have the headlines in the newspaper, Florida man does something stupid.
Florida man dances like an idiot. Yeah.
Yes, they can be talking about Ron Gronkowski.
Well, hold on, though. We're talking about him and Mojo, and you'll have to correct me because I don't remember everything, and obviously you paid very close attention to WrestleMania. Mojo and him had a little bit of a problem where Mojo won the 24/7 championship when Rob, now you got me doing it, thought he was going to win it.
Now, who are you talking about now? Who's Rob?
Gronkowski.
Oh, Ron. Okay.
Where is their relationship today? Did they end night 2 of WrestleMania as friends again, or was there still a feeling of betrayal?
No, because he beat his own homeboy for the prestigious 24/7 title, did Ron Gronkowski. So now Mojo, but Mojo's a flunky. He'll take it and like it. He's a flunky. It's obvious who the dog is in that relationship and who the cat is. He's going to take it. And he's going to like it because he's carrying Ron Gronkowski's bags around. That's why I figured it'd take him like Adam Sandler. He could be the water boy, and maybe he could walk on and do some goofy shit and become a star. But
But here's another thing. You're talking about this like it's imminent, like it's going to happen. We don't know when football's coming back. So technically, I guess there's still a chance he could be actively involved in the fantastical world of WWE.
Well, see, now you've ruined my whole goddamn mood there because I thought this was big news. He's going back to the NFL. Well, they won't let him. They won't let him do anything physical. I don't know whether getting, Mojo Rawley to fucking blow him is physical or not, but
didn't in the old days, a lot of these guys actually have in their contracts they were allowed to wrestle in the off season? I mean, when I say old days, I'm talking about the 60s, like Ernie Ladd.
Yeah, the 50s. Yeah, well, see, here's the thing. These two fucking knuckleheads are friends, and I guess I think Mojo, in all seriousness, did somehow flunk out of football. He just, he didn't make it. But this Ron Gronkowski is a big-time NFL football player. I've met big-time NFL football players. Wahoo McDaniel didn't act like that. Ernie Ladd didn't act like that. Is it now? It's not just wrestling where the modern generation of the athletes acts like goddamn complete fucking buffoons when they get out in public, or it's not just wrestling. It's just, is it the generation rather than the generation of specific athletes in a specific sport? Can you imagine Wahoo McDaniel? He did the fucking war dance, but he wouldn't do that goddamn break dance or whatever that fucking Ron did. And he wouldn't act like a silly putz like that, and neither would Ernie Ladd have. Or Leo Nomalini or whatever the fuck. And yes, a lot of those guys back in those days, because that's why Wahoo finally left the NFL for wrestling full time. That's why Ernie Ladd did also. That's why all the guys that left the NFL in those days, I think Bruiser got kicked out of the NFL.
Different story
for,
there.
Beating up the coach with the football helmet or whatever the fuck he did. But there was more money in wrestling. The NFL was not a big money enterprise in those days. And a lot of times that's why some football players tried to become wrestlers and didn't, because their wrestler friends told them how much money they were making while the guys were still in the NFL. So some of them would have contracts written specifically with the teams. Yes, I can wrestle in the off season, because they might make almost as much money in the off season wrestling as football stars as they would actually playing football as football stars. And so, to protect the relationship, the teams let some of the guys with a big name, others that would have just done it, part-time or whatever, and not been big names in wrestling. I think a few of those guys I've heard just would wear masks every once in a while and pick up a few extra payoffs, and nobody knew it was them. But anyway, Ron doesn't have to worry about that. With his bodily movement, everybody's going to know that's him. But you're right about another thing. When do we know there's going to be sports again? Because do you want to go and sit in the middle of thousands of people that you don't know and walk through shoulder to shoulder and fucking push around in the whole goddamn 9 yards in the middle of thousands of people that you have no idea where they've been or what they fucking got? It's going to be a while.
Yeah.
But fortunately, if you're just a gambling freak and you love to gamble and bet on sports, you can stay sane and stay entertained with access to your favorite games like blackjack or roulette or slots. Or if you love sports, there's esports. You can bet on esports, from NBA 2K20 to all that other stuff that me and Brian don't know how the fuck it works. But all you got to do is go to mybookie.ag. And if you go there and use promo code JCE, you'll get 150% bonus on your first casino deposit. And that's up to $750, by the way. Promo code JCE at mybookie.ag for 150% bonus. And of course, we've talked about this before, Brian. You and I, neither one, have any idea how this works. And I'm too nervous to bet on anything, even whether the sun comes up tomorrow or not. But a bunch of people love the sports and they love the betting. And now there's nothing to bet on. What are you going to bet on? Fucking, last year's Kentucky Derby? If I can find somebody to bet on last year's Kentucky Derby, I'll fucking bet. But like I said, now you've got an option. If you like to play the games in Vegas, they got professional dealers at their tables live on site 24/7. If you like sports, they've got the leading esports brands, so you can bet on virtual action. You can always have something to bet on at mybookie.com. What are you going to bet on, Brian?
I'm going to bet on esports. I want to see how long it'll take Jim Cornette to complete Tetris.
Well, I thought you were going to say you're going to see how long it takes Jim Cornette to flatten the curve May 1st through the 14th. Anyway.
You are a Tetris expert, aren't you?
Well, I'm pretty good at the Tetris because, I can stick those big square objects in those tight spaces and make it all come out even. Anyway.
What do you prefer, roulette, blackjack, or slots?
I like the sluts. I mean the slots.
Oh, this is going all downhill from here.
Anyway, mybookie.ag, promo code JCE. You spin, you win, and you get paid with the folks at MyBookie, folks. All right. You're spinning a wheel. You're placing a bet. You're wagering your health, apparently, if you get in the ring with young Nia Jax. Is this what I'm being told?
I didn't want to bring it up a few weeks ago. I think it was on the drive-thru where we were talking about Ronda Rousey and how Nia Jax spoke up for...
She was one I was liking. Yeah, I'll knock you out, bitch. Tell me I'm fake.
Right. And I didn't want to bring it up at that time, but because I didn't know how aware of it you were, and I think some of it you need to see video evidence, that she has a little bit of a reputation for not necessarily always safely doing things with the person she's working with, and it just happened again this past week.
Well, and I saw the clip, and I think also there was a time where she potatoed somebody. Was it Charlotte with a punch, or was it
Becky Lynch?
Becky Lynch. We talked about this. This was a year or two ago, and I remember seeing that and going, okay, that was just kind of something that happened. It didn't look particularly reckless on the punch thrower's part, Nia Jax's, or, dumb on the part of Becky Lynch. It was just, they just connected. It didn't look preposterous. But who was this girl she buckle bombed?
Kairi Sane.
Holy fuck.
And you can't even call that a buckle bomb. It wasn't.
Well, no, it was. Well, the bottom buckle was, thankfully, the floor was there to break her fall, as they say. Gravity is a harsh mistress. I don't really like that buckle bomb to begin with, and I talked to Sting about that last time I saw him. It was I guess at the Hall of Fame deal 3 years ago in 2017 is probably where I saw him last. Or maybe it's the thing, but right before that, we were in Oklahoma at that event. Anyway, I said, what in the world? He said he got buckle bombed by Seth Rollins, Tyler Black, and his head snapped back, which makes sense because you're going backwards and the buckles stop your back and your body. But if you do it right, your head is above the top turnbuckle. Therefore, your head still keeps going. And he said his fucking legs went numb and his arm went, it's just his shit as a stinger, no pun intended, the whole 9 yards. And that's with, he landed fairly like you're supposed to fucking land in that thing. He should have been taking it. This that Nia Jax did to Kairi Sane was the concept of a buckle bomb, but she can't really see where she's fucking going because the girl's in front of her and she's just kind of looking to the side to see. I can tell, you can kind of tell where the corner is because you see from your peripheral vision where the ropes are, but this was a bad guess. And she just, and instead of launching her so that she'd be going straight backwards so that her feet were somewhat still underneath her and her head was straight up, but she's just being propelled backwards toward the buckle. She just kind of pitched her and the girl's legs went up in the air and the back of her head hit the fucking bottom turnbuckle as she takes a flat back bump on the fucking mat. And that's pretty much in reverse what fucked Tommy Young's neck up years ago and ended his career with that neck injury. Was he just fell to the bottom rope and it hit his forehead and it snapped his neck back instead of forward, but same principle. And if Kairi Sane had been any heavier, it probably would have been more dangerous because that's the only way that a lot of these smaller wrestlers, either the guys or the girls, can get by with some of this shit that they do is that they just don't have enough weight to them when they land on their head or in some description to do the damage that it should do. But if a full-size fucking wrestler did that, it'd cripple them. And is there a need that we have to do this fucking move? Is it when it ends well only part of the time and it's not that fucking impressive to begin with? And I've seen some people, they get buckle bombed and they land right, and then the guy charges in and they come out with a fucking super kick. So the buckle bomb didn't even stun them. But it really could paralyze this other fucking guy over here when they drop him on his head wrong. Why the fuck is this move this special that everybody's got to do this when it keeps fucking up?
Well, beyond the buckle bomb, what do you think about the fact that Nia Jax now has a bit of a track record when it comes to doing things that seem to be rather reckless in the ring with an opponent who's relying on her to not be reckless with them?
Well, that's another thing. Someone should speak to Nia about just that. That's what I'm saying. I can't believe that nobody would have gone up to her immediately after that match and said, "Hey, here's the thing. Don't do that move again ever." Because already a wrestling legend, Sting, had trouble with that move from Seth Rollins when it didn't even look anywhere near that nasty in one of their rings. Why wouldn't you say no? It's not that it's not that impressive. We don't need it. Don't do it. I can't believe that somebody wouldn't have gone up to Nia Jax, because I know I would have in OVW. So I can't believe somebody in that multi-million-dollar fucking company and all the employees they got would have gone up and said, "Hey, it'd be a good idea. Don't do that anymore, ever. What the fuck were you thinking? Let's look at this so you can see exactly why you should never do this again, and look at the thing on tape." And if it's, she's a big girl and she carries weight and she can hurt people whether she knows it or not. If it's been a couple of times over a period of 2 or 3 years, then that's the shit happens because she's a lot bigger than her opponents type of thing, unless it's something she's been told not to do and still she does it again and with the same result. Then you got to say, tell you what, why don't you go home?
There was one clip I saw, I think it was Charlotte, where she gave her a shoulder breaker on her knee.
Oh, I saw that.
And they just dumped her right on the top of her head.
Well, yeah, it kind of looked like she didn't really know when she was going down for the shoulder breaker. She wasn't sure which shoulder was supposed to land on her knee, and she kind of did it at the last second and just, oh, well, fuck it, just kind of dropped her and she clumples to the mat. But yeah, when you're that much bigger and that much stronger than most of the girls that you're going to be working, or most of the opponents you're going to be working with, you have to learn to be a little more careful and try to err on the side of safety as far as doing complicated shit that, as Dusty said one time, you might not know how to do, and or just where you land and how you throw people. Because you can hurt people either way. You can land on them or you can throw them, and you can hurt them either way.
Would she still be there today if she wasn't The Rock's cousin?
Well, I forgot she was The Rock's cousin, so now that makes more sense. But I can't answer that because I've seen 2 of her matches, so I don't really know. But if somebody if she was not sternly chastised after that buckle bomb, then something's up. Something's going on.
You know what I'd like to see? I'd like to see Ronda Rousey come back and stop her.
Oh, good Lord. And then somebody on Twitter said, Cornette, because I said, well, bully for you, rah-rah, retweeted her, right? Well, Cornette, Ronda Rousey's a real judo champion and she can fucking goddamn armbar and this and that and the other. I said, no, if they got in a real fucking fight, still, since Nia Jax is 200 pounds heavier than Ronda Rousey and also of some kind of Samoan descent, I have a feeling she'd sit on her and eat her eyeball. So that's the same thing. Are we talking, what are the rules of the competition? Yes, Ronda Rousey's going to stretch Nia Jax in any form of judo or probably any form of grappling. But if gouging eyes and just using your weight to smother a fucking bitch are goddamn legal, then I probably might bet on Nia Jax, especially since Ronda Rousey has not been shown to be very mentally tough for the number of times she takes her ball and goes home. And did you see everybody going, oh, Ronda Rousey worked you. Ronda Rousey worked you. It's all to get heel heat.
I did see that, yeah.
What the did she or did she not, out of her own chicken lips, say the words fake fights?
She did.
Did she? Okay,
did.
then I don't care. Then that's where she lost me right there. If she said, well, these ungrateful fans, if that's what they mean by she's working to get a heel heat, fine. You still said fake fights, you silly bitch. So now you're just being a prick to get fucking heat on purpose instead of a real person that's getting heat because they're just a real asshole.
And by the way, I don't know if my bookie will take this action, but I'd put money on Ronda against Nia Jax.
Well, I would too, except I said if fucking eyeball eating and or gouging and or potentially fucking, blunt instruments are allowed, I think Nia would
have to get to her. And I think Nia's had knee injuries. I think Ronda would be able to take her legs out.
Okay, well, you didn't tell me about the bad knees.
Now, look, if she gets her in a buckle bomb spot, it's over.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah. But I would go with Ronda. This is what has become a professional. Yeah.
Well, here's the thing. I don't know whether they want to piss off any of their current talent roster or not, because they've already fired everybody that they can probably let go. And, poor old Vince, he may not be able to take care of all of his wrestlers. It might be feast or famine here pretty soon, because even if he saves all that money on all those wrestlers he fired, Brian, he's being sued for $20 million by Oliver Luck, who apparently has had bad luck in trying to get his money out of Vince. Explain to me how Oliver Luck, I'm going to call him, who the fuck is Oliver Luck? How the fuck is somebody that nobody has ever heard of past his immediate family worth more money than Stone Cold Steve Austin, The Rock, The Undertaker, John Cena, or every other top superstar wrestler that Vince McMahon ever had in his fucking billion-dollar company that was built on wrestling superstars? Who the fuck is Oliver Luck?
Well, he's not a nobody. He is, first of all, he's the father of Andrew Luck, who's a quarterback in the NFL.
Oh, the father of Andrew. Well, that's like being the fucking nicest guy in prison.
But he's a former football player who transitioned to being a executive in football. And I think why he was important to the XFL, although I'm not justifying the $20 million salary, although quite frankly, when it comes to the commissioners of other sports, go look at how much they're being paid. It's ridiculous. But he was the guy who was able to bring some credibility to the fact that Vince McMahon had a football league.
What? But they had credibility?
They had more credibility this time than the first time by far.
Well, that's because the NFL doesn't have as many fucking fans as they did 20 years ago either. At least watching on television. But no, the fucking point, I can understand if the commissioner of the NBA or the NFL or whatever might be making $20 million because they're multi-billion-dollar fucking sports industries, but outlaw football in its first season and you sign a contract with somebody for $20 million fucking dollars? You could have brought Dick Butkus back from the fucking dead to give somebody credibility with football people for $20 million. Reanimate the fucking corpse of goddamn Bronco Nagurski for $20 million. How is this guy potentially, possibly worth $20 million? Why would Vince promise him $20 million? And we know why that Vince doesn't want to pay him $20 million. That's easy to guess. Right. But what the fuck?
I think I said this a couple of weeks ago. Never underestimate Vince McMahon's desire to burn money. To not just say, hey, I'm really good at this. I'm going to make as much money as I can from this and be happy. It's always, I did this, but I want to show everyone I could do more. How many millions can we burn through this time? And I think that's what happened with the XFL here.
I just saw that, and I was like, cumulatively, yes, John Cena's made $20 million from the WWF and WWE. Cumulatively, I'm sure Steve Austin did. I don't know if The Rock stayed around long enough to make the 20, but $20 million in a contract. to one motherfucker from Vince McMahon, and it's not Steve Austin, it's not The Rock, it's not The Undertaker or John Cena or even Triple H. It's fucking Oliver Luck. I wish him good luck. He should have been retained by retained Stephen P. New for this. He might have a chance of getting this money out of Vince. Do you see him getting it?
Well, look, I think it is a little suspicious that they fired him. They sent him a termination letter the day before Vince cut the entire league, before he laid off everyone. And then 3 days later, they file for bankruptcy. So I think it is suspicious that all of a sudden they fire him for cause a day before everyone else is let go and 3 days before they file for bankruptcy. I do think he has a chance to get the money. And there's one thing we've seen, that Jerry McDevitt is very successful unless the other side has a really good case and money. Jesse Ventura, the WWF. So this will be interesting.
What was the cause? Why did they fire him? What did he fuck up?
I have not seen that publicly anywhere, so I don't know if that has been exposed to the public yet.
Well, that will be interesting to see exactly what he fucked up one day before they decided to close the whole goddamn thing.
Right. I mean, that's the thing. The timing is, I think, what damns Vince McMahon here. Yeah. Beyond the bad concept and everything else. Yeah.
Of course, because it's obvious what he's doing. But once again, ladies and gentlemen of the wrestling community, if you sign a contract for 3 years with an out clause every 90 days, then you just signed a 90-day contract. And apparently, even if it doesn't have an out clause, if they want to figure out a reason why they can get rid of you, you're going to have to fucking wrestle them to get your fucking money. What the fuck? You know what? After all of that, I don't even remember what the fucking transition was for this, so I'm just going to go with it. Athletic greens is a subject that we've been talking about, you and I, lately, Brian. And the reason we've been talking about it is because we've been taking it. Because I found out, I don't really work out a lot, and I'm willing to admit that I'm old and broken down, and so I shouldn't have as much energy as I used to. And I've been, taking a few things that we've advertised here on the program to give me the energy to get up and fill some Cornette's Collectibles orders. But the one thing I'm worried about, I've eaten shit for a long time. You're aware of this. Just shit. And I'm thinking that my fucking health in my gut, as they say, my gut health is not what it used to be. So when this stuff came along, I decided to give it a try, and so did Stacy, because after all, she'll take anything. Mikey likes anything. And son of a gun, this stuff actually seems like I will say this. It's not even in the copy here that they give us in the informational materials, but I'm more regular. I'll say that. But anyway, Athletic Greens.
Certainly not in the copy.
It's not in the copy, but still it helped because it's a nutritional formula, an all-in-one daily drink that supports better health and peak performance. And I think my peak performance peaked out and saw its shadow and went back in a long time ago, but it does support better health. It's a blend of vitamins and minerals and whole food sourced ingredients. A greens superfood powder designed to help fill the nutritional gaps in your diet, and it addresses the 4 pillars of health, which are energy, recovery, gut health, and immune support. And I'm more susceptible to stuff than I was when I was younger, so I want the immune support. And I've eaten shit all my life, so I want gut health. And this stuff is packed with all that kind of things. An all-in-one solution to help your body meet its nutritional needs. No need for multiple pills or complex routines. You just take a scoop of this stuff and you fucking mix it up and boom. And it's got less than 1 gram of sugar. But as Stacy said, it doesn't taste it. Let's face it. Some of these things taste like you've just ground up some fucking grass from out in the backyard. But this has a pleasant taste. It goes down well with, as Stace says, a hint of banana. Because it's got fruits and vegetables and botanicals, all that kind of stuff in it. Anyway, what did you think about it?
I have really been enjoying this. I've been drinking it in the morning with my breakfast. And, we've talked in the past. You've ridiculed me because I juice. I get a bunch of vegetables and fruits and I cut them up and I put them in the juicer and make a juice. And then this I really enjoyed because this has prevented me from all the cleanup, from having to go to the grocery store to buy fruits and vegetables to juice. I could just take this, I put it in the bottle it came with, I put some water in there,
dump it in, mix it up,
and I drink it with my breakfast, and I really like it. It tastes really good. I have not tasted the banana that Stacy has referenced, but it's a very healthy and good taste, and I have very much enjoyed this. This is definitely one I'm going to be sticking with for quite a while. I'm a big fan of Athletic Greens.
You and your juicing, I'll tell you, the only time I'm going to go through all the fucking trouble of getting a blender and getting all this stuff and sticking it in and measuring the ingredients and everything is if I'm making a big old chocolate milkshake with about a gallon of ice cream and a quart of fucking chocolate syrup, then I'll go through all that trouble. But otherwise, you just pour this in the thing with the water, you mix it up, you drink it, you go. Anyway.
That's right.
Here's what you need to do. Whether you're looking to boost your energy levels, support your immune system, or address gut health, now's the perfect time to try Athletic Greens for yourself, and you can visit athleticgreens.com/JCE to get our special offer, 20 free daily travel packs with your first purchase. That's a $79 added value, and you can get this stuff delivered straight to your door so you don't have to go out in public. athleticgreens.com/JC/. Is that different than a regular slash?
I think it's the same as the slash, but...
Well, nevertheless, just slash me on there at athleticgreens.com/JCE is the slash, and you'll get 20 free daily travel packs with your first purchase.
That's pretty good. I got to say, that's one of the other good things about this. Not only with juicing, you have the cleanup, and you have to go buy all the fruits and vegetables at the grocery store, which we want to try to avoid, but the other thing is, if you really add it up, that ends up being a lot of money for vegetables and fruits. This ends up being cheaper per day than juicing, than getting smoothies, than even getting coffee. And like I said, I've really enjoyed this. This has become a part of my daily routine now.
And they've done all the work.
That's right. And it's NSF certified for sport for all you athletes out there.
Who's the NSF?
It's this thing that Vince started. It's about to go bankrupt.
I thought that was not safe for work.
No, there would be a W in it if it was not safe for work.
Oh, NSM, not safe for work. Well, whatever the fuck.
Sports Federation.
Oh, that was Inoki's old group that he bought from fucking Pedro Martinez.
Johnny Powers.
I remember that now. All right, I got another email from Georgia. Most of our listeners are writing from Georgia. They're about to get opened back up, so our listenership in Georgia will go down. Everybody's going to be catching the virus. But Joseph writes, just a memory from my childhood I wanted to share. And I like sharing these intimate, personal communiques and moments from the cult listeners because it brings back memories for me, too. He says, the only time I ever saw my grandmother was when wrestling went on TV and she needed someone to turn the antenna to pick up another station, or when my dad would take us to one of the arenas in Georgia to see wrestling. I don't remember a ton about who wrestled or what the event may have been, but I do remember my 70-something-year-old grandmother wanting tickets on the front row because she was going to beat the hell out of Jim Cornette. I'm thinking it was at the Albany Civic Center. That's a very good possibility. But I remember Jim coming down the short walkway they had and my grandmother screaming at him at the top of her lungs that she was going to beat his ass, and he pulled his tennis racket back and said, "Shut up, you old hag." And that old woman had to be held down by my father. So, of course, from then on, Jim Cornette was on the side I was rooting for just because my grandmother couldn't stand him. Well, thank you, Joseph. That brings back great memories of getting attacked by elderly women in Albany, Georgia. And I want to ask you, when is the last time that you saw an old woman at a wrestling match?
You know, the other day, someone posted a photo somewhere. I can't even remember where it was from. But it wasn't like terribly long ago. It wasn't like the 50s. It was probably like the 70s, maybe even early 80s. And the entire like front row, not even a front row, the first few rows, mostly older people, men and women.
Yeah.
And I'm looking at that like, wow, that entire audience is gone from wrestling now.
Well, when I started going to the Gardens in Louisville, most of the first couple of rows were definitely adults, unless there was some adult bringing a kid, and a lot of older people, because they were the reserved. They were the seats that they came and sat in the same seats every week, and they had been coming for years and years. And obviously, you had Bouncing Beulah in Knoxville. She was, so old, poor thing. She passed away not long ago. We talked about it, but she was so old, they built the building around her. But every town had multiple, either, there was a guy, everybody called him Grandpa, at the Louisville Gardens, that one time in the 90s, he had been there so many weeks in a row, never missed a show for like 20 years or whatever, to the point that one week he wasn't there. And Ms. Jarrett, or whoever was running the show at that time, it was in the 90s, had Dean Hill announce that he was okay, just in the hospital for some procedure, and he'd be back next week, because the fans were all asking and people were worried about him. And those were the loyal fans that were going to come no matter what the established local promotion, and it might change hands over the decades, but they would come to see pro wrestling. And they would bring their kids, and their kids would bring their kids. So I remember many times you had an old grandmother, her son or daughter and their spouse and the baby sitting on their knee. So there was like 4 of them in 3 seats, because they didn't charge the baby. But that baby would, 7 years later, would still be going to the fucking matches every Tuesday night. And, like you said, we've lost that completely. Because, well, number one, what adults, I want to say what adults over the age of 18, but especially today's wrestling, when you've seen the shit from guys that meant it years ago, and then you couple that with just the silliness and the goofiness. They keep saying that NXT's one of their bigger demographics is over 50 or whatever. Is that just because they are the only kind of halfway serious wrestling product? And because they don't really do anything to appeal to a senior citizen besides just actually wrestle.
Yeah, I don't know. I can't explain. I mean, that's one of the interesting things for a while now with all WWE programming beyond NXT, is that even though it appears that they're marketing towards children, and they certainly treat the audience like they're either children or idiots, it's an older audience that actually is watching it more than it is a younger audience.
Well, it's the abusive relationship principle. They've always watched wrestling, so they're going to continue to watch wrestling. And this is the most familiar wrestling, the WWF, their WWE, the brand, even if it's all changed. If they just can't bring themselves to stop watching wrestling, that's what they're going to watch. But nobody goes to the live events anymore. Older people, especially not the old women that want to fucking attack the heels. And can you imagine an elderly person can you imagine a person over 50 in that All Elite Wrestling crowd? They would look like a fucking screen door on a submarine. Just completely out of place. And so it's become, unfortunately, with the lack of territories, the lack of local promotions, the lack of regular live events in every city, and the lack of seriousness and the lack of realness, instead of something for everybody, male, female, of every age and from every economic status and walk of life, it's become a niche nerd thing. And then the fans who remember when the shit used to kind of be good and you could get into it, and they're older and they're watching because they, are not going to stop watching wrestling. Like, I don't want to end this abusive relationship. I know it's not going to end well, but I can't bring myself to be the one. And that's what we're left with. And the numbers reflect that, do they not, at this point?
Yeah, it really does.
Oh, well, anyway, you know what? We've always got our memories. And if you are a person like me who's always been popular with elderly people and like to piss off grandmothers, well, I know how you can make your grandmother feel good, Brian. You can get her a skylight frame.
That was a fantastic transition there. I got to give you points for that one.
It was certainly wonderful because, no, Think about this. If your grandmother hated me when I was a manager and she still remembers that to this day, you can send her a skylight frame and then you can email her a picture of me that will pop up in it. And you can FaceTime or Facebook or Skype or do whatever the kids do these days with their parents and their grandparents. And you can see her face when she's throwing shit at the skylight frame. Or if you want to be nice and not a prick, since you can't be around the family these days, you can send your loved one a skylight frame. And we've talked about these things. They're fucking cool. I don't know how to work it, but Stacy set it up for me. Everybody else will know how to work it because you have to do the email and the phone thing that I don't do. But the frame takes emailed pictures that are sent to it, and it did not just one, but multiples of them. And it can store them, and you can slide and swipe from one to the other. And if you like one that somebody sent, you can touch the gimmick, and they'll know that you liked it. So it's like an interactive frame that varies depending on the subjects that are sent to it. And this way, if you can't do a family reunion, if you can't do a birthday, if you can't do some kind of special occasion, you send the frame, they open it, they set it up, and they instantly, the pictures pop up of anybody that you want them to see. Have I pretty much summed this thing up?
Pretty much.
And it's cool. It really is. I've got Harley here on my desk right now, and I can just look at any number of pictures of her showing her little furry belly. So if you want pictures of your friends or people you know showing their furry bellies, you get this thing and you set it up, and it's that easy.
It's very easy, and I like it so much. I actually signed up for the premium service they have, the Skylight Plus. So now I get to not just email photos, but there's an app. So I get to just drop photos from my phone right into the app. They pop up on the frame right away. And also I could even put some small videos on the frame. And this is great.
It does videos?
It does some videos too with the premium service. And I will say with Father's Day coming up, no one tell my dad, please. But this will be my dad's Father's Day gift because I could just load it up with photos and he has all the photos. I can just drop them in the app anytime I want and they'll pop up in the house wherever he puts it. Hopefully in a suitable place, like on the mantle or next to the TV.
Wait a minute. What if he didn't know what it is and he just thinks it's a frame he's supposed to stick a picture in and he just puts it in the drawer? You gotta smarten him up to it.
No, I think he'll be smartened up to it. I think.
But anyway, regardless, this is the way to be there without actually being there. And that's the way we got to be there these days. So if you go to skylightframe.com and enter code JCE, you get $10 off your purchase of a skylight frame. So these things are cool. They're great gifts. You can have multiple ones in a variety of the places in the house because you can change them all willy-nilly with a whim, and they can all be different. So $10 off your purchase of a skylight frame. Just go to skylightframe.com and enter code JCE. Should I spell it for him? Like to hear it? Here it goes. SKYLIGHTFRAME.com, code JCE. Save $10. If you do everything I've said in this show, you've saved about $100 today. Everybody listening.
All right.
I don't know what more you expect for one man. All right, Giggle Boy. What are you doing this week on your various programs?
Well, this week on the Arcadian Vanguard Podcast Network, get information about all shows on Twitter at Superpodcasts or on Facebook, facebook.com/Arcadian Vanguard. All shows available wherever it is that you find your favorite podcast. A couple quick things I want to mention here this week. One, as we talked earlier about Scott Bowden's unfortunate passing, go through the archives today of Kentucky Fried Wrestling at KFRpod.com. All episodes are up there right now. They are free. I encourage you to go through them, hear his body of work, hear the many great moments of history that are discussed, including classic audio, as well as some of the hilarious moments from the past of the show. KFRpod.com. And on that topic this week, on the 605 Super Podcast, The Mothership, we have a special... You were very quick this week, I must say.
Yeah, I was waiting on it. You didn't hurt me too bad.
We have a special Remembering Scott Bowden where we take a look at some of his memorable moments on the Arcadian Vanguard Podcast Network, including his appearance on Austin Idol Live, his appearance on Ron Fuller's Super Studcast, and several segments, including a conversation with you, a conversation with Jerry Jarrett, and leading into his encounter with Mil Moskris, where he snuck a tape recorder in his pocket to go capture Mil Moskris on tape and have him confirm or deny if he was in Memphis on that fateful night in 1979. It is a great look back at Scott Bowden. Check it out today. 605pod.com, or available wherever it is that you find your favorite podcasts.
The mothership.
The mothership.
All right, you're fading too. Real quickly, you know what day this is? I hit you with this right before we went on the air, and you knew what day it was, but you didn't know why it was significant. It was 33 years ago today, April 24th, 1977, that Jerry Jarrett ran his first event as the Memphis promoter in the Mid-South Coliseum. He'd been at the Cook Convention Center since the split with Goulas like 6 weeks before that. And this was the debut in the Mid-South Coliseum when he pretty much won the war and Nick folded up, left Memphis. That was also, I said at the top of the program, it was not I first met Dusty. Actually, I didn't meet him. I just saw him in person for the first time. But that was the night. That was the first time I ever went to the Mid-South Coliseum to see wrestling after having seen all those tapes from the early 70s, all those sellout crowds and the Fargos and Lawler and Brisco and all that cool shit, right? So just walking into that building was incredible. But looking back on it, as we've done deeper dives in the past on this particular event as related to larger spans of Memphis history, but this was a really important show because it established Jerry Jarrett as the promoter in the dispute between him and Nick Goulas that the NWA was in favor of. And that had to be a bitter pill for Nick Goulas to swallow because Roy Welch had been an NWA member since I think the year after they formed it. I think he joined in 49 or 50. And then as Nick became the face of Goulas and Welch, you know, no promoter had the NWA logo on their television, on their TV announcer's desk, mentioned it more, had it in all their newspaper ads for all those years. And then because Jarrett had Eddie Graham and Jim Barnett behind him, and nobody else but the Sheik wanted to help poor Nick. So while Jarrett had all of the Memphis talent, including Jerry Lawler and Bob Armstrong and Rocky Johnson and all those fucking guys that, you know, were over in Memphis, Nick was left with Fargo, Tojo, a bunch of the guys from his Nashville end, and Sheik would send down himself and Bobo Brazil and Crazy Luke Graham and maybe Abdullah the Butcher, and it didn't work. But Sheik was the only guy that would stand behind Nick. But anyway, I thought we would look back quickly at the results of that fateful night because it was called the Parade of Champions, and it was the most expensive ticket prices in the history of wrestling in Memphis, which I think led to the fact that it didn't sell out. But
hold on, before we go through the results, I got to ask you though, in 77, what were you doing? I mean, were you already driving? I guess you wouldn't have been already driving.
Well, no.
So how did that, in terms of you going to this show, was it did you have to work on your mom to convince her to get you there? What happened? How did you get there?
Well, let me tell you this story, young man. I was already doing the photography in Louisville at the Gardens, and obviously I'd been watching the show for so long, and Memphis was the Golden City, right? And I'd always wanted to go, but of course it's 380 miles from Louisville. But I was also still getting the Memphis wrestling ads and the clippings in the newspaper from my pen pals down in Memphis, so I could keep up on what was going on. You know, I was obsessive with this, and we did everything through the mail in those days. They'd send me, every 2 or 3 weeks, they'd send me all the ads and clippings about wrestling from the paper, and then I'd send them programs and shit from Louisville. Well, when the split happened between Jarrett and Goulas, it was seamless in Louisville and Evansville up at this end of the territory because Jerry Jarrett, when he was Memphis booker working for Goulas and Welch, he had come to Louisville and come to Evansville, and he had got the TV clearances himself, and he had got the arena contracts, and he had formed Louisville Wrestling Enterprises and put everything in Teeny's name, Christine Jarrett, his mother. So the TV, the building contracts, there was no interruption, no change of venue, nothing that would let you know that something had changed with the wrestling in Louisville and Evansville, except that suddenly, instead of Goulas Welch Wrestling, the wrestling ad said Jarrett Wrestling Enterprises. Otherwise than that, we wouldn't have known. But since it was such huge news in Memphis, because wrestling was so big in Memphis, it was front page news in the Memphis Commercial Appeal. I have all the articles in my collection. I have a couple of them, a full page article about the changeover in Memphis wrestling, framed and on my wall in the vault. That's where I got the news and figured out that Jerry Jarrett had split off. Well, I didn't figure it out. I read it. He had split off from the established promoter, was going to run his own show, and they'd switched TVs from channel 13 to channel 5. And that's why the one day when the strange TV show showed up here in Louisville, it was still the Memphis wrestling guys, but didn't have Lance Russell and Dave Brown. That's where we were like, oh, fuck. What the fuck? They've got rid of Lance and Dave. And then when I got the article and I saw what had happened, Lance obviously was the program director at Channel 13. He had to give more than 2 weeks' notice. Dave was the weatherman. Jarrett had to make deals and get him away. So for a period of like 2 or 3 weeks, we had off-brand outlaw announcers. Otherwise, not everything was the same. But the newspaper coverage said that Jarrett was planning his biggest event ever, the biggest event in the history of Memphis wrestling, on April 24th, a parade of champions. Well, immediately after I got that article, the next Tuesday night, I asked Teeny. I said, wow, what's going to happen? Oh, yes, Jerry's got his own company now, and we're proud of it, and he's going to do this. And that's when I got in the back of my mind, because now we've got the inn. We can get tickets. I can get into ringside and take pictures. That's when I started working on my mom, because I'm 15. I can't drive. But then as we found out that he was winning the war and it was going to be at the Mid-South Coliseum and the big card was announced and all this stuff, my mom said, okay, we'll do it. And we even took this lady that went to the matches with her daughter, and they lived out here fairly close to us. They wanted to go also. So she took them, because that way this lady could help her back and forth do the driving. And off we went to Memphis. And that's how I got to see, Jarrett's first card in the Coliseum was my first card in the Coliseum. But I was a manipulative little young man at that time. And plus my mom, it was a big deal. And she was starting to be friends with Teeny, and they took care of us. We got front row tickets. She comped 4 of the $25 Golden Circle tickets. But that's, as I was mentioning before with the ticket prices, I was expecting, this will be a complete sellout, because that's what I'd seen, in a lot of cases on Memphis TV. I still wasn't really smart to the business then. Didn't know exactly how this was done or what was going on. But Jarrett took a page from Eddie Graham's book, and with a world title match in the main event and this big, card that they had. In the previous week, I'm looking at the ads in Mark James's fine book, Memphis Wrestling History. The previous week, the ticket prices at the Cook Convention Center were about the same as they'd been at the Coliseum. Ringside $4, risers $3, and general admission $2, because they had cheap tickets in Memphis because they ran 52 shows a year. The ticket prices for this show, $25 front row, $10 the rest of ringside, $6 risers, $5 loge, and $3 general admission. So, while the announced crowd was only 8693, they probably, to that point in time, did the biggest house that they'd ever done in Memphis wrestling because of those ticket prices. But still, it would have at 4, 3, and 2, they would have turned them away on this fucking night, because they had 6387 the previous week at the Cook Convention Center, which that's almost all it would seat, and for Lawler and Rocky Johnson in the main event. But anyway, having said that, there was a couple things interesting as I look back on it. It was announced that Ron and Robert Fuller, who were in the Knoxville territory, and they hadn't been in Memphis together as a team in a couple years, They were going to face the Executioners, who were the WWF Tag Team Champions. You remember that, don't you, Brian?
Oh, of course. The famous appearance by the Executioners, Killer Kowalski and Chuck O'Connor in Memphis.
Yes, Chuck the Monster O'Connor, who would later be Big John Studd. They were the WWF Tag Team Champions, WWF back in those days. They were in all the magazines, all Apters magazines. It was Killer Kowalski, who was 6'7" and 275, and Chuck O'Connor, John Studd, who was like, at that time, 6'9" and 320, 330, in these purple outfits and with the lightning bolts down the fucking legs, right? When we get there, it's Ron and Robert Fuller, all right, but the Executioners were these two guys that were a masked team underneath. I can't remember what name they used in the Knoxville territory. I think they just rode over together. And the Executioner, they were about fucking 5'10" apiece and had white outfits with the mouths cut out. But they put Ron and Robert over and had a nice little, they probably had a better match than Kowalski and O'Connor at that stage of their respective lives would have. But it was a chance for Ron and Robert Fuller to be shown. And now in hindsight, or to be seen and get a win, in hindsight, Ron Fuller was the owner of the Knoxville territory, Southeastern Wrestling. You know this from the Studcast now. He and Robert were two of the top talents in the territory, and Jarrett was going to start working with them to switch talent back and forth from one end of the state to the other, because Nick still owned Nashville. He was in the middle of them. So it was like they were playing a game of tic-tac-toe. And Jarrett was hooking up with Ron Fuller to trade talent back and forth, because that way both their companies would prosper, and Ron was another NWA member. So Ron Fuller was on the card.
Well, another interesting thing is that when Ron started Southeastern, Jerry Jarrett was a big help to him, and he was actually getting talent from Jerry Jarrett and not from his grandfather and Nick, and he never got along with Nick Ulis, and he actually called his grandfather to ask for permission to get out of the booking arrangement that the Knoxville office had previously under Kazana with the Nashville booking office, and his grandfather allowed it, and that opened the door for him to start working with Jerry Jarrett, who helped him out from the day he opened Southeastern.
Yeah, so then here was Ron returning the favor. Now that Jarrett owns his own company, they're opening that relationship, and it's another show. This is the NWA members on this show are ridiculous. They had a 6-man tag, Ricky and Robert Gibson and Gorgeous George. Let me try that again. Was that Robert? Yes, I'm looking at the ad here. Yes, that's when George had switched. So Ricky and Robert Gibson and Gorgeous George Jr. against Pat McGinnis, Ken Dillinger, and George McCreary. And that was just for the babyfaces to get a win. But then the Southeastern Tag Team title match, Tommy Rich and Bill Dundee, who were the Southeastern Tag Team Champions, because they had just had a big show the week before in Knoxville at the Civic Coliseum with Harley Race defending the world title in the main event, and Rich and Dundee had won the belts over there, and they were defending them on this night against Porkchop Cash and Norvell Austin, who were in Memphis, but the Knoxville Tag Team title was being defended in Memphis by two Memphis guys. So they were working together, and obviously Rich and Dundee retained there, and then Jarrett starts playing with it a little bit. Mike Graham and Kevin Sullivan were a top babyface team in Florida, working for Eddie Graham. Mike obviously was Eddie's son. They weren't their Florida tag team title was not called the World Tag Team title at that point. But since there was no national cable and there was no internet, Mike Graham and Kevin Sullivan became the NWA World Tag Team Champions on this night and defended against David Schultz and Bob Orton Jr. Schultz was in the Memphis territory. Orton was working mostly in Knoxville at that point. But there you got Orton Jr. is one of the best workers in the business. And of course, he's a Florida veteran. Graham and Sullivan were a top babyface tag team. They'd worked together a bunch. And Schultz at that time was just starting to be figured in the main event. So it was a good match, but it was for a phony title, but it was a good match. That's the first time I actually saw Mike Graham and Kevin Sullivan in person. And they represented the Florida office because Eddie Graham, come to find out years later, was in the back because he had come up to see Jarrett's first event. So Eddie Graham, one of the most influential guys in the history of the NWA, is not only blessed Jarrett's card, but is there in person to see, the kickoff of the promotion. And then the local tag belts, the Southern Tag Team title, which is in big words, in big letters in the newspaper ad, NWA Southern Tag Team title. So they had basically 4 NWA title matches on this card. Phil Higgerson and Dennis Condrey, who were the champions at that point here, and Rock Hunter was their manager, took on Tommy Gilbert and Dusty Rhodes. Talk about the odd couple. They wanted Dusty on the card, and that's the place they put him. I'm not knocking Tommy, but it was an odd tag team. But Tommy had been having a program with different partners against Higgerson and Condrey for the most part over the previous few months. So he brought in Dusty Rhodes, and obviously they didn't switch the belts. They did a DQ, but that's the first time I got to see Dusty, and the people went nuts over him. When he came out, you could tell things had stepped up because they were used to the Memphis talent. And, you know, Rocky Johnson got big pops and Lawler got big boos. And even, you know, Graham and Sullivan were a big name team at that point. They got a polite response, but everybody knew who Dusty was. And he came out in the fucking, the furry robe he used to have with the psychedelic colors and the fucking hat, and did his fucking butt wiggle. And Phil and Dennis bumped their asses off for him because they wanted to get a fucking job. Dusty, he wasn't a booker at that time, but he was the biggest star in Florida. He was on Atlanta TV, on TBS cable. He was that year he'd start making shots in Madison Square Garden if it wasn't the previous year. So he's a big star. And if he had said, hey, I want to work with these guys named Higgerson and Condrey, they're in Memphis, Eddie Graham would have brought him in a heartbeat, which is what they were hoping for. And later on, wouldn't you know who won the pony? When Dusty Rhodes comes to the Superdome and works with Bobby Eaton and Dennis Condrey, they did the same thing. They bumped their ass off for Dusty. And this time he said, yeah, I want those guys in. And he was the booker this time. But anyway, it was a good match. Didn't have anything to do with the local programs per se, besides that Tommy Gilbert was in it, but it was a showcase for Dusty. And once again, the biggest star, one of the biggest box office attractions of the NWA is on the card. And then the 2 main events, at the time I was pissed because I wanted to see Harley Race and Jerry Lawler for the title. And that probably would have sold out as well based on, you know, the demand for seeing Lawler in a title match. But what I didn't know, and in hindsight now do because I'm smart to the business, besides the fact that Race and Rocky Johnson in their first match on, what was it, March, where are we at? God damn it. They wrestled on March 1st in the Coliseum. Race and Johnson for the world title, and Harley Race fucked him, but they sold out 11,257. So almost 2 months later, this is the rematch of a sellout, and Harley Race and Rocky Johnson one more time. Harley fucks him again and wins the match with the roll up in the tights, I believe it was that night. But the co-main event was Jerry Lawler versus Jack Brisco for the Southern Heavyweight title, because in hindsight now I realize Jerry Lawler had to beat a former world champion on Jerry Jarrett's first big Coliseum card. So Lawler defended his Southern title against Jack Brisco, and that's where the famous picture of him throwing the powder at Brisco's eyes came from. And son of a bitch, it was the local commercial appeal photographer that got that, because I was on the other side. I was behind Lawler, just the way it worked out, positioning in the ring. But Lawler wins and beats a former NWA world champion 1-2-3 by pinfall. And then they have a main event where the most popular babyface at the time, Rocky Johnson, gets a rematch, but gets beat again with an out. But Harley Race establishes the NWA title again in Memphis, as if anybody was concerned it wasn't going to be put over by Jerry Jarrett, the new promoter. So this was all done wonderfully. And then it was in December that finally Lawler got the match with Harley Race. They went an hour Broadway. They came back the following week with a 90-minute time limit, and that's when Jimmy Valiant came in and broke the bottle over Lawler's head and stabbed him. Race left with the belt, and Lawler and Valiant drew money for the next 6 months. So instead of sacrificing future business for his big blowout show that he could never be able to top, Jarrett instead went with a big blowout show that he could control, gave him some stars, gave him fucking a world championship match, positioned his real top star as a winner, and fucking kicked his fucking territory off where he would run the Mid-South Coliseum till when did they move to the other building at the fairgrounds? 93. For the next 16 years, 50 shows every year, except when they moved to the Cook Convention Center because the Mid-South Fair 1 week or 2 weeks a year. So that was a pretty good fucking debut show, all in all, and I thoroughly enjoyed it.
And now, the weeks leading up to that, Jarrett was running Cook Convention Center, and Nick had been running the Mid-South Coliseum with George Goulas and his usual crew.
Well, yeah, and with no television. Even worse, because he couldn't get to, when Channel 13 saw they had lost Lawler and lost all the local stars, they had never dealt with Nick. They hadn't even really dealt with Roy Welch, because Roy Welch had made Jerry Jarrett the booker in the late 60s, and Roy would ride down, but he never came out in public. He didn't appear on television. He was always in the locker room. He was always in the back. Whereas Nick, on Monday nights in Birmingham, was the opposite. He was always on the television. His face was always out there. He always claimed to be the promoter. He was out in front of the box office cussing to people, tell them, hurry up and get in the building. So Roy is the one who installed Jarrett as the booker and sort of left Memphis in his hands, and even said one time, the Greek will never run Memphis. So even though there were different towns under their promotional banner, they had different personalities. They had different bookers. They had different ways of presenting things. And Nashville, Birmingham, and Chattanooga stayed under Nick's auspices and were booked the old-fashioned way that Nick had been doing it since 1940, and that Lynn Rossi had been doing it since the 50s and 60s. And with George on top. Because George wrestled a few times in Memphis. People think he never even got booked on the cards. He wrestled in a few underneath matches in Memphis, but nothing of any importance. Whereas in the towns that Nick controlled fully, he'd been a main event guy for 3 years at that point, and business was starting to suffer as a result of it. And for a while in 75, Nick had even shoehorned George, 75 and 76. He shoehorned George into Louisville. That's how I saw him so much, because George was in Louisville much more than he was ever in Memphis. But anyway, finally, when this split happened, it happened over Nick badgering Jerry Jarrett to push George more in Memphis. And Jarrett knew that Memphis was the magic city of the entire territory, that it bought certain people a certain way. George would not get over, and pushing George in Memphis would lead to the ruination of their main city. And he wouldn't do it. And Nick got testy with him, and Jarrett thought he had bought in to the main office and said, well, I own a piece of this too. And that's when Nick revealed to him that actually he had just put money up in some kind. Well, Jarrett used Nick's attorney to draw up the papers. So whatever the fuck it was, the point is, Nick said, you don't own shit. And Jarrett said, well, we'll see about this. And within a week, he had the entire crew of wrestlers under his wing instead of Nick's. They all went with Jarrett instead. All the Memphis end guys that Jarrett had been booking and making money for. The only ones that stayed with Nick were Fargo and Tojo, because they'd been with him for 20 years and they were worried that this thing was going to explode. And then they ended up coming back 2 years later when Jarrett had won the whole thing and gave Nick a mercy payoff and absorbed Nashville. Birmingham and Chattanooga were already gone by that point. Birmingham was part of what would be Continental later on under the Fullers, and Chattanooga had been ceded over to the Georgia office. So it took Nick 37 years to get to 1977, and he made nothing but money all through that territory for all those decades, and it took him less than 3 to fucking lose it. Anyway, speaking of rich people losing territories, let's go to the AEW review real quick, shall we? Holy fucking hell. I've got some notes here.
Now, we didn't do this last week on the show, so what?
We did not.
Did you see any of last week's show? Or are we talking about the show that aired this week?
We're talking about both, briefly. Because I went back, I had last week's DVR'd. I didn't have time to watch it because of the insanity of the merchandise situation. But I zipped through some things because I wanted to see what they did. And I'm loving Jake Roberts' promos the past few that I've seen now that he's talking more about Archer and involving Archer in. And then Archer had a match, this is last week, with Colt Cabana. And it was a good match. It was really good. Colt was actually serious. Archer looked strong. He sold for Colt because Colt is a recognized name in wrestling, but he didn't oversell. And I thought that worked. I applaud Colt Cabana, who the only principle. I used to think he was the fucking silly wrestler, but now that so many others have come along that are so much more silly, he's moved up the ladder without doing anything.
But is that one of the frustrating things with Colt Cabana, in that there are so many guys who are silly and they can only be silly? He's silly and at points silly beyond any reason.
Yeah.
But he actually can wrestle when he wants to.
So you're saying, is it worse that you can do it if you want to and you just don't, or if you don't do it because you can't do it to begin with?
That's exactly what I'm saying.
Which came first, the horse or the egg? Or did you put the chicken before the cart?
That's right.
They have a deal now where Taz explains some of the holes, explained Hager's choke, and that was a great deal. The bubbly bunch, I don't know what the fuck's going on there, but I saw it was everybody in Jericho's group talking on their phones on Skype, and I zipped through that. Because you wanted me to watch the empty arena match with Moxley and Jake Hager, right? And so that's primarily what I was going to watch on this show. And I have several random thoughts as I watch this thing. JR built Hager well as an athlete coming out, gave it some credibility. Why does Moxley still has to enter through the back door of an empty arena? He had to come through the back or through the seats and walk all the way. It's a giant empty arena. They taped this, three weeks ago when JR could still travel and before everything got shut down. But shut down.
Actually, I don't know about that. I think JR may have been doing the commentary from a remote location, was the impression I got.
Okay, well, even better, he didn't have to travel. But the point of this has been taped for a couple of weeks because they were in this big building. But he still got to come through the whole fucking arena. Okay, anyway. When they started, they were serious. It was good. They were being tight. Jim Ross, I think, is the only one they have that could have called this as an athletic wrestling contest. Tony wouldn't have been as detailed. Excalibur would have been worthless. Jericho would have been entertaining, but not as analytical as JR was in this. It was good. You could tell. I could tell Hager was leaving openings for Moxley because Hager's at a bit higher level fucking trained grappler than Moxley. But, he was leaving openings for him. A couple of them you could drive a truck through. But they were working competitive wrestling or / grappling, right? And then it opened up into more of the professional style, and they were nice and stiff, chops, whatever. So they were telling the story that Jake Hager was more dominant on the mat and as a wrestler, but Moxley was a better brawler. That was the first segment, right? I didn't see anything wrong with that. Then they went to the floor and they started fighting on the floor and they go to the break. Okay, well, everything's fine. But then, well, what did you think? Should we do this segment by segment? What did you think of the first segment? They started out fine, didn't they?
I guess. It was 2 weeks ago, so you watched it more recently than I have.
Yeah, about 45 minutes before we started recording this. But anyway, okay, then I'll say they come back from the break and they're still on the floor in the same place. So 3 minutes later. So anyway, but they're going back and forth, but now they go into the arena and now they start losing me because now they're doing the same fighting in the arena stuff that everybody has done to death. And it just looks anymore, especially with no people. I liked it better and it looked more legitimate. I'm not just talking about real, but just it looked more professional, more major league in the ring. Now you've got them, they're having to do the walk stagger thing from place to place. You know how when they're fighting, but they have to obviously go somewhere, so they're kind of fighting and staggering and walking and
yeah.
Like with Brody and Abdullah, for all the money they've drawn, when they used to have the fight in the arena, they just grab each other by the head and just walk. and just walk and fucking clear fans out from in front of them. And they're putting holes on each other in the fucking stands. And now it's starting to look outlaw. Because I'm not even trying to knock these guys. But as I've said, fighting in the cool locations gets old quick. It only works with fast-paced chaos, people trying to break it up, not just wandering around and doing moves to each other for 10 minutes, till even Jim Ross ran out of shit to say. Because how do you talk about a guy's amateur athletic background or the philosophy or the psychology he's applying to dominate his opponent when they're doing figure four leg locks around the fucking seating rails? So they did the same shit that all the outlaw indie matches do, but with no people in the building. And then they go back to ringside and get back in the ring, and they do an awkward 1-2 because they're throwing those fucking forearms because nobody can throw a punch anymore that looks good. And they're doing and nobody can do the 1-2 because they can't get the rhythm. So now it's dragging a little bit. Now they go to the break again. When they come back from the break, Jake Hager, this monster, charges across the ring where Moxley's draped in the corner and clotheslines him in the corner 3 times in a row. Boom, boom, boom. And suddenly he goes to do it again, and Moxley just ducks and puts fucking Hager down with one fucking clothesline with his bad arm. And then they start going back and forth again, and then they go back outside of the floor. And I'm not saying Moxley is not selling. Moxley is selling his ass off here. But then Hager, the MMA guy, gets a chair, and instead of just, if anything goes and there's no holes barred, he could just take this blunt instrument in his hand and just take the guy down in front of him and just beat the fuck out of him over and over until he's jelly, right? But instead, the MMA guy takes the chair and sets it up wedged in between the turnbuckles in the corner so that then they can do the contrived spots where they tease each other running into it until finally Moxley charges, Hager moves, and Moxley runs into the chair and didn't even budge the chair. It didn't knock it out of the ropes. It didn't budge it. He just put his hand up and tapped it and then fell back over. Did you see that?
Yep.
What? And then they go to another break. They built up to the chair is a live hand grenade, and then when he runs into it, he does it. It's not like I want him to run his bare head into it as hard as he possibly can, but if you run into the chair, shouldn't you, with your hand, cause the chair to go flying out of the way to emphasize the impact that you just ran into this fucking chair? It didn't move. And didn't make it a lot of noise. And then they go to the break. And they come back, and the fucking, now Hager takes the chair and whacks Moxley on the ankle with it. And then puts an ankle lock on him. If you've got this chair in the ring and the chair is being used and in front of the referee because there's no holes barred, and just hit the fucking guy over the fucking head and beat him. Why do you hit his ankle with the chair to then put a hold on him? Then the ankle lock stays on for a minute while Moxley sells like he's going to the electric chair, trying to get to the ropes. And as he almost gets to the ropes, fucking Hager pulls him back. And then suddenly Moxley pops up out of the thing and hooks a hold on Hager. Then they start trading forearms again forever with Moxley not limping after he's got chair to the ankle lock for a minute from the shooter, and now he's back up, boom, boom, boom. And suddenly Moxley flings the chair into Hager's face and DDTs him on top of it after he flings it in his face. Instead of him picking the chair up and just whacking the fucking guy over the head, he sets the chair on the ground, grabs the guy, and DDTs him onto the chair. And then 1, 2, 3. Did this match make any fucking sense, Brian Last?
No, and that's why I didn't want to say anything earlier where you said, should we talk about it segment by segment? Because I thought you have to really look at it as the whole body of work. I really didn't like it. I thought it went forever. The commercial breaks weren't a big help, but, there's only so much you could do there. I thought the commentary at times, and there's only so much you can do when you're a one-man commentary booth for a match like this, but I thought the commentary...
Well, yeah, and also, he started, that's why I was saying the first segment, I was into it. And JR was making it sound plausible, And it looked like something that a professional company would do. And then suddenly by the end of it, like you said, it went forever. And it took so long. And JR had run out of shit to say, because what can you say? And Moxley sells his ass off in every single one of his matches, but nothing ever actually hurts him. Remember when there were 6 guys beating on him and he wouldn't stay down in the fucking hallway, so Darby Allin had to stand there for 5 minutes to look at it on the screen a few weeks ago. He sells everything at the time, but nothing ever stops him, nothing ever hurts him. And then he cut a promo to the floor camera forever that sounded like he was trying to talk himself into what he was saying, and then they go off the air.
And, I thought the build-up to this was really good. The vignette packages that they've been airing on Dynamite leading into this match were really good. That made you want to see the match. I really didn't like this match. I think I said it before. I like Moxley's personality. For whatever reason, and again, this is a different kind of match and there's no crowd there, but he kind of loses me with his matches.
Well, besides the fact that it's so long, there has to be so much contrived stuff so that he could overcome all these violent things. And there has to be the garbage indie show fighting outside and all that stuff that it just seems like he has to do. And I know they've got to fill time. And that's going to be a issue on the next week's show, this past week's show that we are talking about in a second. But I'm not blistering them because I know they're under duress, that they've got to fill time with a half a crew or whatever. But they have such a great technical crew. The packages come off so well. The packages tell stories. They have pay-per-view footage involving these people in these matches that they could elongate the packages so that the guys are not out there for 30 minutes in front of no people taking, all kinds of bumps over and over again that don't really fit the fucking thing because they're trying to fill time. If you have matches on television, they should be telling a story for a specific purpose to lead to something rather than just everybody's going to go out and either try to have the greatest match ever in front of no people or just do this stuff that psychologically, what the fuck is something because the fans are gone out of the arena. Does that mean now everybody's invulnerable? Because I'm seeing a lot of guys take shit that hospitalization angles and just instantly later on from zero to hero, they're back up. And anyway, yeah, I didn't get this whole thing, dog.
For the record, and I guess in some way for comparison's sake, have you or have you not watched the Gargano Ciampa empty arena brawl from NXT?
I have not yet, but I'm going to, but I haven't yet because somebody also told me that it was quite lengthy and I haven't had the time.
Oh, it's very lengthy. That's a theme. That's one of the reasons where I think you can compare and contrast the two matches, although they're shot very, very differently. I'm very
You know what? Everybody always said, oh, nobody wants to see all those long, boring hour Broadways anymore. Well, these guys are going almost an hour and there's not even a fucking time limit you can milk. Let's jump ahead to this. That was my thoughts on last week's AEW show, and that's pretty much what I gleaned from it. But this week, I had to watch this week. I did, because they were teasing everybody. Can my little dog Pockets actually really have a match? That was the question going into this thing. So I did watch most of this entire program. And obviously, what?
When you say that, does that mean you got to a point where something pissed you off and you turned it off?
No, I was going to.
Okay.
But I did not, and I'll explain why. But and once again, I know that they recorded this the same times they recorded the last week or two's programming is it QT Marshall's gym or wherever in Georgia with part of a crew. I love the atmosphere so much more than anything else when they've got the guys in the fucking in that building. It's like a warehouse or a gym and an OVW type building where it's small anyway, so it's not like huge and sterile. And they've got the guys yelling and screaming and making noise. So this is the best atmosphere you can have for wrestling, and they've done some good things with it. The Cody package at the beginning on the tournament, I know you're going to fucking hate it. I liked it. It's movie-like, but I liked it because Cody, he says that shit well. He's well-spoken. He emotes. But nothing about this was hokey or phony. in terms of making fun of the matches being fake or silly. It was just kind of cool shot video, and he's putting everybody over in the tournament. I didn't have a problem with that. Well, I know you don't like Cody's more theatrical points.
I don't like the theatrical segments in wrestling in general, the ones that are just completely ridiculous. There's no plausible reason why there would be this little control room on a soundstage that's being filmed. Like, this just doesn't make any fucking sense. Beyond that, I think Cody in front of a crowd is one thing. And even there, I get to a point where sometimes I'm like, okay, you're hamming it up. But when I watch this, it's seriously, I tweeted out, it looks like he's auditioning for a show on the WB. And then someone actually corrected me and said, oh, actually, it's the CW now. So that's what it comes across. It comes across like a guy badly trying to be an actor, badly trying to play a role. And to me, it just comes across as completely preposterous. I don't know why. Well, other people like it.
So you're saying it was a club sandwich with extra ham. That's what you were saying here.
Yeah, that's a nice way of putting it. I wasn't a fan of this at all.
Well, once again, with some of the other stuff on here, I could have taken more of this. Chris Jericho makes even the rotten segments of this fucking program bearable, and especially when he said about Kenny Olivier, that Rocky Dennis looking fucking face and pumpkin-headed dipshit.
I can't believe he said that. When I heard Rocky Dennis, I was like, oh my God.
And somebody on Twitter thought he called him a rotten dentist. And Jericho said, I said, Rocky Dennis, you idiot. Google it, right? Pumpkin-headed dipshit. But anyway, I love Sammy Guevara's promo. When he promoted the tournament, his promos are getting better. He's an annoying little prick heel. He was talking his ass off there. He's the kind of guy in the old territories you could go out and you could let him cut a promo and get some fucking heat and send a babyface out to beat him up, and he'd still have heat after he got beat up. So I like that. And he's promoting a match with Darby Allin. It's the first in the tournament for the TNT championship, right? Whatever the fuck. And I wanted to see this. And what the fuck? Tell me what you thought of this match before I say a word.
Well, it wasn't what I was expecting. And these are two guys I am high on. And I think they are a positive look at the future, potentially, of AEW. But the match, I don't know, I'm at a weird point. I've watched a little bit more of this stuff lately than you. And I've gotten to the point where I really hate empty arena wrestling or small arena wrestling. This match, I don't know. It felt like too much.
Well, too much was one thing, but they better than anybody else on this show could have pulled this off because they're so athletic and they're so quick. And Guevara had talked it up, and people like Darby Allin. Darby Allin feeds off the live crowd, but the folks watching at home like him too. Anybody watching this program at this given point in time with all these other handicaps, they're devoted fans, and they would. But here's how they fucked things up. They started with their finish and then finished with their start. Here's what they did for the folks who didn't see this. Immediately, Guevara dives out on Darby Allin before the match starts. The bell is not rung. Bashed him into the fucking guardrails, pulled out a ladder, fucking bridged the ladder from the apron of the ring to the guardrail to keep the 17 wrestlers back or whatever. The guardrail to the apron, bridged it with a short step ladder. And short is the key here, because the longer those ladders are, the more give they got in them. This was not a long ladder. Then Guevara gets up on the top rope. He puts Darby Allin on the ladder, stretched out, flat, facing up, gets on the top rope, and gives Darby Allin a full splash, a stiff full splash on the fucking ladder where that goddamn ladder didn't give a fucking cunt hair. And it looked like he caved fucking Darby Allin's ribs in. And then as Darby Allin is laying there, they say, well, this match hadn't even started yet. You think it's going to? And they go to a break. The first thing we see on this show, and the first thing these guys do, is a hospitalization angle used as a break spot. Then when they come back from the break, Sammy Guevara tosses Darby Allin in the ring and the bell rings. How the fuck would that ever happen? I know that they're shorthanded, but in any other wrestling program in the history of wrestling, if somebody did that, boom, and splashed a guy like that, all the referees or agents would run out, or officials, they'd be helping him out of the building. They'd be fucking criticizing the person who did this, Sammy Guevara. You wouldn't start the fucking match. Now they just start the match, and I wrote, well, I was actually interested in seeing this, but now if this 175-pound guy even gets back to his feet, I'm pissed because it's bullshit. And guess what happened? They start the match, and with a minute and a half, Darby Allin is back on offense. Not only is he back on offense, but when he had Guevara trapped upside down on the ropes, he pulled Guevara's boot off and started headbutting Sammy Guevara's bare foot and ankle. Yeah. So now we're going for less than 5 minutes after a goddamn hospitalization angle. Then there was an edit. Sammy Guevara is on the apron of the ring, and he does a one barefooted springboard into a cutter on Darby Allin in the ring, but he must have missed it the first time because there's an edit, and he did it again apparently. But of course he hits that, but that doesn't stop Darby Allin. Darby Allin gets another ankle lock on the barefoot. They do another set of awkward 1-2, and by the way, everybody knows what I mean by 1-2, right? When they stand in the middle of the ring and one guy punches the guy and the other guy punches him back, and the other guy punches him and the other guy punches him back. It's 1-2, 1-2. That's how you call it in wrestling. If you're both down, he says, get up and get a 1-2. Except it's supposed to be punches, and they're supposed to look good, and there's supposed to be a flow to it. Instead, they all just fucking, I think I saw a 1-3. For a minute there, they did a 1-3, 1-3. They couldn't even get the 1-2. They were potatoing each other left and right. Darby Allin's nose is fucking bleeding, and they're working their ass off, but psychologically, this was a fucking mess. And somebody let them down here by either telling them to do all this shit or telling them once they had thought of doing it that it was okay to do it instead of changing all their shit. Then they go to another break. When they come back, Darby Allin goes for that great fucking dive he does. The low, what did they call it? The lope instead of the tope, where he goes over the bottom rope head first like an arrow straight out and shoulder blocks the guy. But instead, the fucking, Guevara moves and Darby Allin goes straight from the ring through the ropes head first into the guardrail. The same guy that 10 minutes beforehand had what we would have believed was 6 broken ribs and internal injuries, has not only become competitive again in this match and is kicking ass, but now is fresh enough to do this dive. And then when he misses it, goes head first into the fucking barricade. Guevara tosses Darby Allin back in the ring and hits a 450-degree something splash off the top rope and gets a 2 count on the guy that's just speared himself into a fucking guardrail head first. And after that, within 15 seconds, Darby Allin is as fresh as a daisy, back to hero from zero, and pins Sammy Guevara with his weird leg lock, 1, 2, 3. I wrote here, great talents that need to be saved from themselves. This match made no fucking sense. What if they had done this? What if they had started their tournament match like normal folks in a fucking wrestling ring, and the bell rang and they had a nice match and they did some of these moves and they skipped taking the fucking guy's shoe off, because then a barefooted fucking, instead of a slappable faced motor mouthed heel in the top group, he looked like a mid-card fucking comedy heel with one fucking boot off. Instead of taking the boot off, they had a match that they could have had with all their athletic shit. Darby Allin does the same finish. He pins Sammy Guevara with the weird leg lock, 1, 2, 3, advances in the tournament. Sammy Guevara is so fucking pissed that he has been shown up and defeated and let down the inner circle that he attacks Darby Allin from behind, fucking incapacitates him on the floor, puts him on the goddamn ladder, goes to the top, does the fucking same exact splash that he started the match with to be the last thing you see, And you go off the air with Sammy Guevara, a loser, but smiling because he took out Darby Allin, the winner who advances in the tournament, with that fucking splash and has left Darby Allin in jeopardy now in his future tournament matches because he could have broken ribs. That might have made sense. That would have been the first thing that I would have thought of if somebody had told me they were going to do this shit. What the fuck? What is it going to take to fucking hurt this guy if that shit that they did to Darby Allin, this 175-pound skinny little feller that everybody loves, none of that hurt him? What are they going to have? Are they going to run over him with a goddamn bread truck next time to get some heat on him? It didn't make a lick of fucking sense.
Everyone has an amazing immune system in AEW. From Road Warrior Buck to Moxley to Darby Allin, everyone can get destroyed and just pop back up and be fine.
Then we went to a promo from Matt Hardy from the Hardy compound. He was broken. I don't get the whole thing, and I've said that I like Matt. I don't get the broken thing with the promos and the accent and the whole thing. His promos never had that much oomph before. But then suddenly, broken Matt Hardy says, let's hear from Matt Hardy, or however the fuck he transitioned it. And suddenly it's Matt with normal hair, and he's speaking normally, and he's doing a great job. And he's cutting a promo, and he sounds real. And I like this Matt Hardy. And he sounds like he means what he says about Jericho and everything else. He's well-spoken. He's got conviction. He's got passion. Matt Hardy has never been high on a list in the past of great promos. I don't think on anybody's list years ago. But all of a sudden, I'm not talking about the broken Matt Hardy. I like Matt Hardy can speak now as himself. I don't understand the broken thing. I guess that's the showbiz that everybody wants. But Matt Hardy speaking as himself did a very good job here.
I agree. I like the serious Matt Hardy. Unfortunately, I didn't want to hear him because I had just seen Community Theater Matt Hardy do another one of his wacky promos, which I hope to never see again. And
he looks like a cross between Vincent Price and Beatrice Arthur.
And I respect the commitment he has to doing that voice, because once they went from Community Theater Matt to Serious Matt, it's like, holy shit. Like, it really sounds nothing like that when he just talks in his normal voice. But goddamn, I hope to never see that again on my TV screen. And I will. It'll be nonstop forever.
Yeah.
But the Serious Matt Hardy was a really good, effective promo. But I don't know how much effectiveness and seriousness matter in today's professional wrestling. It's more about the cheap pop and the ha-ha, and I think that's what people are after.
If I saw a tape of a regular Matt Hardy match and saw it not just cold as a booker, as a wrestling promoter, and didn't know Matt Hardy from Adam's House Cat, but I saw a regular Matt Hardy match where he's being regular Matt Hardy, and then that promo where he was being regular Matt Hardy, I'd say I can bring that guy in here and I can make him a top babyface. Easily. But I don't know. But did you see Alan Angels? I know they were using some wrestling school students, and these guys still look a whole lot better than a lot of old Atlanta TV job guys from the 80s. But Alan Angels looked like Skylo Low with tattoos. He's fucking bald-headed. His upper body is the upper body of a human being at least 30 or 40 pounds lighter than his lower body was the fucking body of. But anyway, he's a job guy. Okay, and I've said we ought to have squash matches, and why don't the main event guys ever win? And ever win convincingly over and just show what they can do? And so here's a chance for that to happen. Alan Angels versus Kenny Doucheface Olivier, who again came to the ring in an empty building, making faces, doing funny stances, and pointing all about. Just go back and fucking watch this. I'm not even going to goddamn critique any part of it otherwise than to say This is once again why this idiot will never get over in the United States to any audience other than the cosplay wrestler audience and the do-it-yourself self-trained gang. Because he was doing a back and forth, doing indie spots with a left-handed midget that nobody's ever heard of. He sold for him ridiculously. He was countering and reversing with him like he was supposed to have a quote-unquote good match here. The guy kicked out of a fucking knee lift, the V-trigger or whatever his fucking sissy name is for his fucking knee lift. The guy kicked out of a knee lift, so then he picks him up and power bombs him and then hits another knee lift to beat the fucking job guy. After the job guy, even Jericho was trying to cover on commentary, was like, well, I didn't expect him to get this much offense. Nobody else did either, because it didn't make any fucking sense. That's not the way you get over. The only people that have ever gotten Kenny Olivier over to any mass audience is the folks in New Japan, and I guarantee you he didn't take a fucking guy out of the dojo for 2 weeks and be competitive with him on their television. This guy, he doesn't know what the fuck he's doing, and he never bothered to pay attention in wrestling school, which is why apparently he's only been to one wrestling school from his own fucking lips. He admitted that. And that's the one, the Deep South developmental, that they fucking didn't use him because he didn't know what the fuck he was doing and refused to learn, apparently. But anyway, go back and look at this now, everybody. There's your fucking top star. There's your big world's greatest wrestler. There's your fucking main event guy who doesn't know how to get over in the United States of America and is countering and reversing with a job guy. And you don't have to be a fucking magician or a genius you just have to be a top guy to know how to work with a job guy and still not just one tackle pancake him. You can make it a little interesting, but not like that. He's another one of these outlaw guys that's never been in a position of responsibility or importance, and he feels like every match you got to go out and have a great match. He's a fucking goof. I assume you went to take a shit during that one.
No, I mean, I agree with a lot of what you just said. To be fair, I feel the same way about when I see an old Ric Flair squash match and he gives too much to the job guy. And I've said that before here on the show.
But he was already over.
Yeah, but I mean, the whole point is if you're a top guy, you shouldn't be having competitive matches that go past 5 minutes with anyone who's not even on the mid-card, not even on the undercard. They're job guys. He's
not even on the card. Yeah, and Flair was criticized for doing that too, but he just wanted to fucking make sure people were stirred up, but at least he was already over. This guy will never get over. Well, he'll never get over for a variety of reasons. His sissy demeanor, his fucking bland personality, his fucking nonchalant manner of fucking speaking in no discernible fucking fashion about anything, his fucking goofy matches that have no fucking logical sense, and his overall ballet dancer demeanor. But this is another reason. Anyway, the Scorpio Sky package. I fucking loved it. He's sitting there. It made him a nice, real human guy. He's well-spoken. He looks good. He overcame a back injury I was not even aware of. In 2 minutes of this package, they made this guy more interesting than their world's greatest wrestling artist that's been on their TV for fucking since it's been on for 6 months. This guy is actually looks like a fucking athlete, talks well, has a story that you could build on about overcoming a back injury, and somebody that seems likable that you would want to pull for. Great stuff there. The problem with, that is that then it said to be continued, and then they're going to go into the SCU years, and they're going to be doing catchphrases and being entertaining. I think Scorpio Sky can be a main event guy if they don't dilly-dally too much longer and start building him as a fucking single. Go ahead.
Did they continue a part 2 later in the show? I was about to ask you that because I thought part 1, like you, was really good, really effective. Humanized him, and that's not necessarily a bad thing in professional wrestling. Made you care about him, and then they said to be continued, but I didn't see part 2.
No, I thought that meant next week. I didn't see it either. So I think maybe that means next week. But You know, they don't need to be the AEW version of New Day tossing out pancakes with their mic stand and their catchphrases and everything. I've said that before. I like all the guys in the group, just not the silly stuff they're doing. But you could take Scorpio Sky and you could make a main event fucking talent out of him easily. I hope they do. I did like the second where Cody was listening to Dustin's voicemail where Dustin will retire if he doesn't win. I like the idea of him listening to the voicemail as another way to get, especially the empty arena and the lack of traveling or whatever the fuck, is another way of hearing a promo. I'm not saying that the use of it here was the greatest thing ever, but the interesting idea, a guy listening to another guy's voicemail. I like that. It was another way to shoehorn a tape into the show. And, you know, and that's when they go to let's skip ahead to the dork order. When they go to head to Brody Lee, and there's that video package of him talking to the unseen recruit, why don't they understand that there's ways you can do this to make it not look hokey and phony? You don't have to. Why is there a camera in these closed-door meetings? Why are they willingly revealing their secrets to the world? You can do a security camera footage. You can do an overheard voicemail. You can do a fucking thing with a cell phone. You can do the camera that's being used backstage is set down on a equipment case, but it's still running. And the camera guy walks off and two guys that are going to have interaction walk past the frame so you see who they are, and then they stop and you hear them, but you're just seeing a camera shot of a stationary camera on a blank wall, but you overhear the information. There's some plausible way of making it not like we're just saying all this shit in front of a TV camera and that we don't notice or that we don't care about. That time when the Heavenly Bodies were going to attack the Thrill Seekers in Smoky Mountain Wrestling, so that I had the week on the Bodies, they were going to come back and put the Thrill Seekers over till Jericho broke his arm. They were still on the road in the WWF, so I had Rex King and Steve Dahl in ski masks play the Heavenly Bodies. We pulled up in a car in the parking lot and beat shit out of the Storm and Jericho. And the way that we had footage of that, this was before cell phones, but fans had video cameras. So we had a fan with a video camera in the parking lot waiting for the wrestlers to show up. That actually could happen and did happen. Every wrestling event everywhere. And I also knew that for what we were trying to do and the feeling we were trying to get across, there couldn't be an adult male involved, either running the camera or being photographed with the wrestlers or whatever, because then the viewer is going, well, motherfucker, you're a fucking man, pick up a stick, help out, right? There wouldn't be as much jeopardy. It'd just be, and then they'd be concentrating on some prick that wouldn't help the Thrill Seekers in a fight. It had to be women and children. So I had Casey O'Connor running the camcorder, but allegedly the fan was a woman, the infamous Pam Lawson. She's standing right next to KC and she's providing the voice. And I think it was one of Pam's kids, somebody's kid. We found a kid. Maybe hey kid, you want some candy? Come over here in the parking lot. I don't know how we got the kid. But anyway, what you see is you see video pop up of referee Mark Curtis getting his wrestling bag out of his trunk of his car behind the arena. And you hear this female voice. Oh, little Ben, go over. There's the referee. Go have your picture taken with the referee. And there's Brian making over the kid. Hey, smile for the camera. And suddenly a car screeches up and the camera turns to see it because it was distracting. And me and these two masked guys jump out and you see their Storm and Jericho over there at the other side of the parking lot getting their bags out. And they get jumped, and the camera starts moving around, and the woman calls the kid back, and Hildebrand, Mark Curtis, goes over to fucking help and gets pickled and put down. And the woman behind the camera is screaming in her East Tennessee hillbilly voice, call somebody, get the police. Oh, they're hurting them. It sounded like something that would happen. If it had been a grown adult guy, people at home been going, well, help the motherfuckers, grab a brick or something. Or if it had been grown children, it wouldn't have had the effect as there's helplessness. The heels have attacked the baby faces in the parking lot. The referee, the only other adult male, is down, and only a child And this woman with a video camera is here to see this horrible scene. And we got the footage from this fan who was so upset, and we aired it. That could happen. There was no buzzkill to take anybody's fucking mind off the point that we were trying to make, which was that the thrill seekers got jumped by my guys and got the shit kicked out of them, and now they want to get even. There were no holes in the logic, and it wasn't that hard, and we did it in one take with a fucking VHS camcorder. So there's ways you can do this shit. And then to go the other way, they actually aired footage on the goddamn happy occasion of the young fucks' fucking self-stroking YouTube program reaching 200 episodes that they've produced and paid for themselves. And they are having a match with each other in their backyard, including their swimming pool and apparently a local playground, for their stupid, silly little comedy show on YouTube. So, on a national cable network, TNT Television, Turner Broadcasting Empire, Time Warner Media, whatever the fuck, their supposed greatest wrestler in the world has just been competitive with a fucking glorified midget with left-handed with a fucking bad set of tattoos, and their supposed greatest tag team in the world is having a backyard match with each other and doing a Canadian destroyer off the diving board into the swimming pool on one of their commercials. Can this be any fucking lower level outlaw? It's past a Saturday Night Live sketch at this point. And no, before anybody asks, I will not be watching these two jackoffs play wrestler and embarrass their $1 million national TV company like two kids playing with their fucking action figures and reviewing it later. I will not be seeing that for any amount of money. The fuck? Did you catch that commercial?
Oh, I caught it.
They threw it. And that after that, I would normally turn the fucking program off, but here was the star of our show. They're finally going to let him do it. It was Pockets versus Havoc for the Outlaw Mud Show Championship. Outlaw Mud Show Indie Wrestling has come to national TV, ladies and gentlemen, and Tony Khan has brought it to you. And the emaciated, fishy white, scarred up outlaw garbage wrestler with the bad haircut, pretty much for the whole match, beat the shit out of the skinny, bland, plain-looking fuck in the blue jeans, first out on the floor forever, since neither one of them knows what to do in the ring. But then inside, Havoc did all the standard indie shit that he and folks like him do, and Pockets sold it. Jericho made it halfway bearable. At least there were no invisible opponents. They tried as best they could, it looked like, to actually wrestle a bit at first. But then after all this violent bullshit that Havoc did, the joint manipulation and twisting his wrist, and he had little Pockets screaming in pain and selling. Then Havoc bites both of Pockets' hands and sticks Pockets' hands in Pockets' own pockets. And Pockets acted like he couldn't get his hands out of his pockets because he left them in there even after Havoc let go of him. And then Havoc was just kicking him in the fucking face while he had his hands in his pockets. This is what I saw, right? Can you confirm this?
I confirm.
Okay. Then, suddenly, after getting the shit kicked out of him all this time and not even trying to really fight back, and especially not even trying to get his hands out of his pockets, Pockets made a comeback with his hands in his pockets for a couple moves, and then he actually took his hands out of his pockets to fucking dive out of the ring. He had to get a dive in. And then he did a bunch of indie Chikara-style bullshit moves that they all do. But then, after getting the shit kicked out of him for the whole match, he got on the top rope, where it looks like now he's trying, and he's going to give the big splash to fucking Havoc. And he gives what they call a lazy splash, where he just stands there and then he just kind of falls off the rope and boom, to show that he wasn't really trying and he didn't care. After he's had the shit kicked out of him and was actually screaming in pain, now he can't even be bothered to be mad enough to splash this fucking guy. Then Penelope Ford, that bleached blonde fucking twat. She's not the tampon girl, right?
What's your problem with her?
Well, because it's all these outlaw fucks. Was she wasn't the girl that stuck the tampon. Was she the tampon sticker or the sticky? Did she get the tampon stuck in her mouth? Or was that another one of these outlaw fucking sluts?
I must admit, if she did, I don't know, but I didn't know she had any involvement with
it was Priscilla Kelly that was the tampon girl.
Yes.
Penelope Ford is the one that was Mercy fucking jellied Nutella. Or whatever the fucking case.
She's now engaged to Kip Sabian.
Well, that's her problem too. So fuck this whole goddamn clown show. If this was the local daycare center or a high school drama class, I wouldn't give a shit. And I wouldn't have anything against any of these people. But if they're going to play professional wrestler on fucking television and waste some guy's money, then fuck it. They're going to like adults, they're going to be told what the fuck they look like. And that's what I'm doing right now. Penelope Ford jumps up and Pockets just stands there and stares at her with his opponent behind him, and he knows it, but he stares at her. Then here comes hatchet-headed fucking Chuck Taylor with the goddamn sloppy body that grabs her leg and pulls her down into a split, which doesn't hurt her because she can split. So then Sabian, her boyfriend, jumps in the ring, runs across the ring, dives over the top rope and wipes out both Taylor and poor Trent. So the heel is kicking the heel manager foils the babyface trying to foil the heel manager. Then the heel foils both of the baby faces. Then Penelope Ford gets up on the top rope and comes off toward Pockets with the referee looking at it. But Pockets ducks. Poor referee Aubrey, by the way, is now the one to be buried in all of these things. Pockets ducks the girl, and out she goes. And then somehow Pockets pins Havoc, but then Havoc dumps Pockets on his fucking head. This was so embarrassing. It was like a bunch of a local outlaw promotion with where all the friends get together and play wrestler, pooled their money, and came up with enough money to hire Chris Jericho to call their backyard show. Is what this fucking reminded me of. It's exactly what it basically, that was what it was. A bunch of outlaw fucks doing stupid shit, and they've, instead of pooling their money like most mark promoters and wannabe cosplay wrestlers do, they've got a billionaire that they're bilking. So the billionaire hired a legitimate talent to call and lend credibility to their fucking play wrestling on national television. Somebody tell me I'm fucking wrong.
I will say the one thing I disagree with you on is I like Kip and Penelope. I think they could do something with them. For the same reason that I like Sammy Guevara.
He looks fucking 12.
He looks like you want to slap him. He looks like a heel that you want to slap, and he acts like a chicken shit.
Guevara looks like you want to slap him. This guy looks like he looks like a fucking accountant. He looks like a goddamn, as a matter of fact, later on he wrestled Dustin. He looked like a 12-year-old child or somebody working at the goddamn, like a bank teller. He just bland, plain, regular haircut, small. Bleh. Anyway, here's the problem. Now that they're in a situation where they need good workers with personality that can cut promos, kill time, be halfway believable, and have good solid matches in front of no people to fill that time and get across what they want to get across, they've got a very few of those and a bunch of outlaw nitwits from the indies that only know how to do silly, funny, ha-ha, and the big moves and don't know a goddamn thing about getting over on television or being entertaining without being silly, without being looking like a Saturday Night Live sketch. And I guarantee if they could get MJF to that fucking building in parts unknown, he could have a 20-minute match never go outside the railing, not use a table or a chair or anything but that ring of his with anybody on the roster. He could win or he could lose, and it would keep your fucking attention, get him over, and not expose the fucking wrestling business. And then he could come back out 20 minutes later when he caught his breath and do a 10-minute promo that would be better than anything else they've got on this fucking program, just because he's a fucking talent. And if you had him and Jericho, there's a 30-minute goddamn segment. They just don't have enough talent. They've got outlaw guys that do fucking wrestling moves. And the MJF promo from Max's Rat's House in Cape Cod, Massachusetts. Did you see that fucking Chiron?
I did.
Tremendous. He has a life-threatening hangnail that's keeping him from wrestling. You thought he was going to be serious and talk about the pandemic. He turned it around on himself. He's got the delivery. He's got the facials. He's stuck up in fucking New York and can't travel, I guess, so we get Pockets and the pumpkin-headed dipshit on television for 30 fucking minutes at a time. And then they go to Brody Lee, who said some scripted, unbelievable, as in not believable, not believing that this guy is saying this stuff to an unseen recruit. I've talked about why is the camera in a confidential fucking meeting. Most of their videos and their packages are the best part of the show. But this whole dork order thing is unsalvageable. It's like trying to pick a turd up by the clean end. There's no path to success here. I don't believe any word that Brody Lee said. He said it with this monotone delivery and a goddamn blank expression to an unseen person. We don't believe if he was really recruiting these people to do some underhanded bullshit, he wouldn't be coming out and blurting it out on national television. We don't believe this whole goddamn thing. From the time we have seen Dork Order, you've got substandard, outlaw, bullshit, mud show, fucking indie talent, the fat guy, Pizzeria Uno, in a fucking ill-fitting fucking outfit and mask. The other guy that's fucking athletic and got no fucking psychology whatsoever. They're a rotten fucking tag team. It's been a rotten fucking gimmick with rotten fucking execution of rotten, poorly thought out angles. And now they bring Brody Lee in, who might be a star if they could figure out a way to present him. And he's doing bullshit with the Dork Order. So they're dragging him down into that fucking hellfire and brimstone pit abyss that they're in of hellish, rotten gimmicks. And he comes out and he beats up a skinny fat guy with a buzz cut named Justin Law. Jericho called him Justin Trouble. That was fucking hilarious. But Brody Lee's, once again, his tights are hideous and distracting and unflattering. And he kills Justin Law, which was fine. It's not like you couldn't see that coming, especially when you looked at the fucking guy, and it's a squash. Guy got over. Except did he really get over? Because he's talking about a fucking bullshit group that nobody's into and has been booed out of AEW buildings. Imagine how much fucking effort that takes. He looks like shit in his fucking outfit, and his direction is questionable. So have they got Brody Lee over as a star, or have they made Brody Lee to the level of the rest of the Dork Order? You pick. Have I missed anything?
I don't think so.
All right, one more match. Dustin Rhodes with Brandy versus Kip Sabian with Penelope Ford. And I'm thinking at least Brandy has a purpose here tonight. Now I know why she's coming out to the ring. She's going to offset the evil female in the heels corner, Penelope Ford, right? And certainly they'll do a spot to pop the viewers at home at the end of this match.
Certainly.
And I figured with Dustin involved, this is going to make sense. It's going to be okay. Dustin is in incredible shape. Out of respect for him, I actually stuck with this show after Pockets, because I saw Pockets and then they teased MJF was going to talk. I said, okay, I'll watch it and then turn it off. But then they plugged that Dustin was coming up. Okay, because normally I would have left the show after fucking Pockets and the fucking AIDS kid. But I wanted to see MJF. Now I want to see Dustin. So it was out of respect to him. And Dustin, to me, is like Barry Windham. He moves so smooth in the ring, and he doesn't get fucked up. And if there's a bobble, he goes with it and turns it into something, and you don't notice. Guess what else I noticed about Kip Sabian in this match? Did you notice this also? He is doing the prissy-prancy fucking Olivier shit. Did you see at one point when he and Dustin were doing something, and he turned away from Dustin. He turned his back on Dustin, and he took the exaggerated running step thing and then turned around and got and away we go, like the Jackie Gleason vaudeville off the stage, and starts running back toward. He looks like fucking Kenny Olivier with his prissy-prancy fancy dancing. They're all doing this now. The independent wrestlers, they do this thing where they've fucking hit a guy with something, he didn't go down, so they turn their back on him, only a foot away, but they turn their back on their opponent, and they exaggeratedly run to the ropes and exaggeratedly run back, or whatever anyway. As far as I'm concerned, Kip Sabian is small. He's small next to Dustin. He's got a fucking bland haircut, a bland face, and he looks like a fucking, as I said, a bank teller. And then they do a spot where Penelope is choking Dustin right in front of Brandy, and Brandy goes over, "You get away now." The first thing you do when you have a babyface and heel manager, because I've both booked them and I've been one of them, and I know how babyface managers get buried. You tell the heel manager under no circumstances until the finish when it's called for, do you fucking interfere? Because it will bury the fucking babyface manager unless he does or she does something then, and it's not time for them to do anything. Or maybe you get a cheap shot and the fucking babyface manager runs around and chases the fucking heel all the way around the ring. Or makes some kind of progress. You can't just let the damage be done and then just stand there and go to the referee. Well, he did it. I've been in that position, and it feels like shit when you can't do anything about it. So buried Brandy. Then they go to the break. Should have saved it for the fucking finish, but with the finish they did, I digress. When they come back from the break, Sabian's getting heat on Dustin's leg. The match made perfect sense. Dustin, I'm sure, was leading this, but he kept it interesting. On the comeback, then they went into a long back and forth. Dustin was doing everything he could to make Kip Sabian a top guy. And I'm not saying that Kip Sabian work-wise wasn't keeping up his element of his end of the ball game. It's just he just looks 12. But Dustin was doing everything he could to make this guy a main event guy. But suddenly, after this match, which was one of the better matches on AEW television I've seen, which made perfect sense, which even if it did feature a fucking 12-year-old, it was fucking moving, and everything was being done in the right way. You love the finish. Suddenly, Kip Sabian takes referee Aubrey to the corner and just is holding her there. And Dustin starts selling in slow motion in limbo in one place because the girls have to get into it. But instead of a deal where the heel girl Penelope tries to get in the ring and Brandy, the babyface, pulls her down and they get in a cat fight on the floor and pop the people at home because there ain't no people in the building, and maybe the referee is distracted by that. Sabian's got referee Aubrey in the corner. Dustin's selling in one place. The girl's getting a shoving thing outside, and then suddenly Penelope Ford rolls in the ring and just takes off running. And runs and hits the far ropes and comes back, but Brandy has rolled in and it jumped up and runs past Penelope. So if Penelope runs past, Brandy's running past her. Brandy hits the ropes. And when Penelope turns around, Brandy hits a spear on Penelope. I guess a spear is Brandy's move. People think of the spear, they think of Goldberg and Brandy Rhodes. And then the spear, and then they roll away. They didn't have to fucking hit the ropes 5 times. They didn't have to. The referee is obviously being held, and here's all this shit going on, and can even see the ropes being hit and moving, and doesn't turn around these girls in the fucking ring doing this convoluted shit. Pull the fucking heel girl out and get in a cat fight on the floor. There was no need to do rope running spots 5 times in the middle of this fucking finish. And then after the girls rolled out, Sabian turned around just left Dustin standing there, looked at him, and then turned around and looked like a dumb fuck at the girls on the floor so that Dustin could run past him, tap him on the shoulder on the way by to say, hey, I'm coming, and hit the ropes and do his own Canadian destroyer on Kip Sabian. 1, 2, 3. Fine match with an awkward, horrible, poorly pre-planned, and piss poorly executed finish that the girls made fucking hokey. What'd you think?
I didn't really like any of the matches on this show. You summed up a lot of my thoughts. I knew they were going to do something with Brandy and Penelope when they were both out there. Once again, by the way, Brandy Rhodes will find a way to get on that show. One way
but
or
no,
another.
But at least there was a reason. There's a girl in the other corner. Okay, that makes perfect sense. I'm all for that. I can buy that. Protecting my brother-in-law against this fucking asshole's evil girlfriend.
Yeah, I don't know. Everyone's running. Why don't they just do relay races on their fucking show?
Yeah. When I saw her roll in the ring and just start running and hitting the ropes, I'm like, what are they? And then Brandy rolls in and starts hitting the fucking ropes. And they're just running around in this fucking, in the middle of the finish of this fucking match with the referee supposedly just, oh, fucking hell. It just, they have to make it complicated. They have to do the same thing that they've been doing for the majority of their careers. I'm not talking about Dustin now. I'm talking about these guys that came straight from the indies. They did all these things off television in small buildings for smart crowds, as they say, all this time, and suddenly, which in that atmosphere, that's the people that want silly, goofy fucking wrestling. And if you've gone to the fucking VFW hall with 300 other people to see independent wrestling, you're going to see a lot of worse, stupider shit than this these days, right? But that's what they think is going to get them over on a mainstream basis, and none of it is. And they ain't figured it out yet. And I know there's a pandemic, but they have fewer viewers now than they had when they started. But you know what? Before there was a pandemic, they still had fewer viewers than when they started. They certainly don't have more. They have less. Why? Because the same people who knew what they were fucking getting with Laurence Olivier and Pockets and the Young Fucks and the whole goddamn clown crew, they're the ones that's still there. They haven't made one goddamn new fan. And if they have made one goddamn new fan that didn't know anything about any of these people before they went on television, it's been because of the efforts of Chris Jericho, to some extent Cody, and some to Moxley. Otherwise, they got the same group that they had at the beginning, which is the small amount of people that want to see nerd bullshit, cosplay, funny, gaga wrestling. Somebody prove me wrong. Anyway, so there was the review, the wrap up. Hold on. People been waiting for this. There you go.
Oh, don't do that. People will buy that from you.
Yeah, well, apparently if they're watching this, people will buy anything. Oh, and Wardlow was in there somewhere, I think. I zipped right.
He had a squash match too.
Yeah, but because here's another thing: Wardlow without MJF is like a day without sunshine. I know they could get him there, but I just instead of trying to build on Wardlow at this point, I just keep him in their back pocket and get him back out when they can get in front of people, or when they can have a MJF with him or something, because he just looks kind of fucking lost on his own. But I guess they're gonna work with what they've got. But this is the lesson. If they had started, they had over a year to plan this. They had over a year to contact good quality talent who they could have gotten out of. I know a couple of people they could have got with Tony Khan's money if they'd have made the play to get them. That would have been major fucking players on a national television fucking basis.
I know people they could have gotten with Tom Casati's money.
There you go. But instead, They got all the cutesies, all their friends, all the little oranges and the little, you know, all the little funny indie darlings. And now all they can do is what they can do. You're asking Cheetah, who used to be able to fill 6 minutes in the Tarzan movie, to be the fucking co-star now. And 86 minutes of Cheetah don't fucking work. And now they're reaping the benefits of not going out and getting a strong, solid, serious, talented roster, but instead getting everybody's indie darling of everybody that goes to wrestling in barns and likes to watch people work with the Invisible Man. And none of them can do anything but jack off on television. And the longer you see it and the more times you see it, the fucking sorer that dick gets, till pretty soon it's too sore and you can't beat it at all. And that's the name of that tune. What are we going to do next week? What are we going to do on the drive-thru? What are we going to do?
I don't know. I have no idea. I think
we're going to answer some questions on the drive-thru. There was talk of watching another watch-along.
Yeah, we did talk about that. Potentially the first ever 6-star match.
Yes, which wasn't actually a 6-star match, but it was a regular old tag match followed by a 6-star angle. And it not only popped business in the Tennessee territory, but carried it over the summer, where one match was the focal point of the entire card, to the point where the entire card was 4 matches, and the first 3 were over with in an hour so they could save the last hour of the show for the last match. This is the angle that started it, and we will watch that. The self-same match that Weasel Dooley and I described as the first ever 6-star match. We'll watch that along with everybody on YouTube on the drive-thru this Sunday, correct?
I believe so, yes.
I mean, the video is on YouTube, so you can watch it along with us.
That's what I was saying. I believe
sync it up and all that stuff.
Yeah, that's what I was saying. I believe so, too.
Yes.
We have the video file. I think it's on YouTube as well.
We possess well, that's because the video on YouTube came from my goddamn video to begin with. So there you go, when you know who won the pony. All right, we're going to do that. And speaking of YouTube, thank you to the 16,000 subscribers we have added the last 3 weeks. We are up well over 100,000 now. Of course, I didn't get a fucking cake. I didn't even get a goddamn Twinkie with a candle in it.
Over 110,000 now.
Or what'd I say?
You said over 100,000.
We're well over 100,000 now. I still didn't get my cake. What do you get for 110,000? A cake and fucking Fresca?
Well, you know, that's the kind of question we're going to answer on Patreon. Patreon.com/Cornette.
Yes, you can join Patreon also and hear the old shows. And one of these days you'll catch up. We're starting at the beginning of the experience in the drive-thru. Sooner or later, all of them are going to be there in their unedited, unexpurgated glory.
That's right. So it's Alice April right now.
It's Alice April. We'll follow that up with Faye May and then Mama June for the summer. Anyway, yes, subscribe to the official Jim Cornette on YouTube. Sign up to Jim Cornette's College of Wrestling Knowledge on Patreon. And remember, folks, you got 6 days. Do what thou wilt shall be the whole of the law, in the words of Aleister Crowley. Do what you wilt and order with abandon at jimcornette.com for the next 6 days, because then I'm taking 2 weeks off to sort everything out and get everybody their stuff. We're flattening the curve. There will be no orders to jimcornette.com, Cornette's Collectibles, between May 1st and May 14th. And then we're going to come back bigger and better than ever, because our social distancing doesn't take that long.
So we might be able to get you to watch some different stuff, maybe some stuff on the network or on YouTube during that period of time?
Just slow down, cowboy. It's going to take me 2 weeks to fill all this shit. You know that as well as I do. But I hope that then once that I have caught back up to even, that then we can handle things from there on out until the next new product breaks the internet. I'm just too popular. Anyway, but yes, we'll do all those things and even more, and some of those things and even less. Folks, I'm about done. Thank you. Fuck you. And until next week, bye-bye, everybody.